You're listening to the AID Network.
Hey friends, I have a quick announcement before we start today's show featuring your friend and mine, Philander Butler. Here's the deal. As we all know, the gates of Disneyland are still closed. And that's why Disneyland for Designers is still showing up every Wednesday. And Downtown Disney is now open, and I've been, and it was a lot of fun. But this Friday is a very important day. It's the 65th anniversary of Disneyland opening up. And the park just simply can't do it right now to make sure it's a safe experience for all of its citizens of Disneyland and the cast members that make this place truly special. So what I've taken upon myself is saying, I think I can recreate a fully operational 18-hour day of Disneyland. Keeping to the schedule, taking folks to all the lands, riding on all of the attractions, just as a fan, just as a fellow lover of Disneyland, taking anybody who wants to go with me, anybody who just wants to get away from this weird world we're in right now, and anybody who wants to spend 1 minute or 18 hours inside of Disneyland with fellow true believers in the magic, true believers in Disney, and just, it sounds so much better than just sitting around going, well, that's something that didn't happen. It is the best way to try to make it happen, at least in our minds, in our hearts, and most importantly, in our imaginations. So you can join me from 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. If you do the math, that's 2 different a.m.s on 2 different days. You can find me over at youtube.com/adventuresindesign, or you can find me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/AID Network. I will be live streaming in both of those locations. The exact same stream will be getting distributed in those 2 different spots, because I know some people don't quite understand Twitch, and some people are YouTube folks, and that's what they have on their TV in their living room. So that's the best I can do. That's the best I can do for everyone. And the best that you can do is you can show up, either for a minute or for 18 hours. At Friday, at any moment, if you want to see where I'm at, if you want to go to Disneyland, I'm just a click away. And so is going to Disneyland. And I hope to see you there this Friday over on YouTube or over at Twitch. What do you say we get started with today's episode with Philander Butler, starting right after this? Hey Disney fans, do you have a Disney fan brand? Do you like to show your fandom by making limited edition merchandise for you and all of your friends? Or do you like to design a shirt for the family to wear to go out to the park? Did you know that you can do all this and save money and get free shipping by listening to this show? Head over to our sponsor, jackprince.com, where you can get site-wide discounts by going to jackprince.com/COT. That stands for Circle of Trust. And Jack Prince has been a supporter of Adventures in Design, the AID Network, and the Circle of Trust since the very beginning. And they passed that sponsorship over to you by giving you a discount site-wide. So whatever you're making for your fan brand, head over to jackprince.com/COT, save some money, get some free shipping, and who knows, maybe you'll discover a product to let you share your fandom with all your friends and fans. This is the story of a beautiful place, known as the happiest place on Earth, and all of its history, its secrets, and its tricks that you may find if your mind believes in design and you allow your heart to believe in magic. Step inside and become a citizen of Disneyland. Greetings, fellow citizens of Disneyland. Today's episode is a very special episode. It's an episode where we don't focus exactly on one ride or the history of one land. Today we focus on something that I don't know how many people have actually considered this. We are focusing today with our good friend, Philander Butler, who's easily been to Disneyland more than anyone you know, and probably with the most interesting list of people that you don't know. Today, he's helping me sharpen my skills to make sure I'm ready to take everyone on an epic 18-hour virtual day of Disneyland. Today, we talk about how the people flow, the park's flow of energy, how Disneyland runs like a symphony, and how you listen to that music and understand how to navigate from land to land, depending on the day, depending on the traffic flow, depending on your next destination. Today's episode is all about sharpening your skills on how well you, myself, and our Jedi Master, Philander Butler, can navigate the roads, the paths, the thoroughfares, the shortcuts of Disneyland. Close your eyes, go in your imagination, and sit back and take all of these different journeys with us today. It's a very interactive and a very fun special episode of Disneyland for Designers. As two friends reminisce from a park bench how they navigate the trails of Disneyland. Philander, welcome back to Disneyland, sir.
It's always great to be at Disneyland, especially with weather like we're having right now.
Oh man, you remember a couple weeks ago when I wrote you, and it was a Friday early in June, and I just wrote you and I said, today was a perfect day in June to go to Disneyland.
Yep.
I was about ready to cry when I sent you that message because I was like, I know for sure I would be there tonight with all my friends, and it would have been a magical night. And I'm stuck in Long Beach on my deck, and I hate it.
Like perfect weather, like not too hot. There's a bunch of cloud cover.
Oh, just perfect.
Yep.
We've been getting a lot of those perfect days, but I digress. So, as you know, you may have heard this rumor. Well, actually, it's not a rumor. It's a real deal. But Disneyland had to go back on their offer to reopen the park on July 17th. And I feel like half of the people were shocked by that, and half of the people were not shocked. Like it almost felt like everybody collectively had their fingers crossed, like, we think that this is going to happen. And the announcement kind of came out of nowhere. And then when they said, you know what, we just can't do it with the state of California and with the way things are going, I did a poll over on my Instagram, and it was like skewed 65-70% of the people were like happy, and then the other people were crying. But the people that were crying also wanted to tell me, like, I'm just sad it's not opening, but I wasn't going either way because I live in Arizona, but I just want it to be open. So it was kind of a weird mix of feelings, much like everything that's happened in 2020 thus far. And so I thought the park's got to be open on the 17th. And so many people had their hearts open and excited to be there for the anniversary. And I'd like to say to everybody who's crying that they're not going to be there, you weren't guaranteed to get in.
That too.
Like, none of us are guaranteed to get back in the park whenever it opens, whenever we want to go. Those are called the olden days back in February of 2020. So, Philander, I took it upon myself to say, I think I can stream the entire anniversary day from 7 a.m. to 1 a.m., open an extra hour for your shopping convenience.
Of course.
And I thought, if I do this, I got to make it feel real. I have to adhere to the Disneyland schedule of from 7 to 8 a.m. on my stream. We're stuck on Main Street waiting for rope drop. And then we will start going around the land. And if somebody pops in the live stream, they're like, Brickey, take me to the Haunted Mansion. Well, we'd have to walk there. Like, I'm actually, I'm going to use technology to walk through the park, POV videos, to ride the attractions. Like, I'm going to really try to manage it like a real Disneyland day. Fireworks, parades, shows. Like, I want to try to make it as real as possible. And now, Philander, I don't think anybody's dumb enough to hang out for 18 hours.
I want somebody to do it.
I hope somebody does. If somebody does, they're absolutely a legend. But the idea is this. At any point in the day, you could pop in and be like, where's that maniac at? You go, oh, cool. He's getting ready to watch Fantasmic. Sick.
Where's that maniac at now?
So I thought, before I take on this unbelievable challenge as a fan, to literally create an entire day of Disneyland with people watching me the whole time over on YouTube and Twitch, I thought, I better sharpen my skills. I better go to the Jedi Master, the only person that I personally know that definitely knows the schedule and the flow of the park better than I do. But I want to put an asterisk next to things. You know the flow of the park with your superpowers. I know the flow of the park as Batman, as the Disney vigilante. Get that out of your mouth in one take. So I asked Philander, throw some quizzes at me just to make sure that I've got my itinerary all straight. And if I promise you an 18-hour operational day of Disneyland, that I can deliver it to you.
I think you can do it. You're pretty good at it. You spent some time there. You know the ins and outs. You hug the outside. You walk around. You have a good feeling. I feel like you go close your eyes and listen and know where you're at.
Oh, hey, that's how I go to bed at night. That's my counting sheep. My counting sheep is I start at the right gate and I go, okay, I'm now by the bathrooms and the little merch stand. I'm looking over at the flagpole, and I work my way through Disneyland in my mind. And you know what? You never make it past the hub. You fall asleep.
It's like, what am I smelling right now? What's the ground feel like? Oh, this is cobblestone. Like, oh, where am I?
Oh, this is the new graded curb. Did I tell you guys about Project Pixie Dust?
Everyone always asks about that, or you ask about navigating the park or knowing so much. And a lot of people, I think it was important what you said is they don't think, or they take the flow part out of it.
Yes.
Like, so many people have a very natural way. It's been there for forever, 65 years, like you said, and they visit and they know Space Mountain's on the right. They know that Splash Mountain's on the left, but when it comes to crafting a schedule for the day or a way to move efficiently around, because time is always, in essence, in my line of business or in anyone, like, you only get an 18-hour Disneyland day, or when you show up you get 12, 7, I don't know what time you come to the day, but time is always important. And the way to craft it so that you get the most out of your time, if everyone wants to spend a specific amount of their day doing as much as possible, whatever it may be, whether it's more food, more snacks, more rides, more shows, just being able to get around. Another thing too, what I find is when I want to put you up to the task is what you think is the best as well. Because I have a lot of individuals that come and or not even with me, even with family and friends, where they're like, they would tell you, Mark, this is my day. I've only got time to do this many things. What things do you think I should do?
Oh yeah.
And that's another now you're whittling Disneyland down to its specific components, and it's like, okay, my gosh, what does this person need to see?
Right.
If they can only do 6 things today, they've allotted 4 hours for Brickey, and they're like, Brickey, what do I got to do in these 4 hours? And you're like, okay, let me see, what can I give this person to give them the essence of Disneyland in only 4 hours? Because that's all they've got. And it's like, I know you'd love an 18-hour day, but
sometimes it doesn't work.
Let me show you.
Yeah,
sometimes it doesn't work that way. It's always interesting to find what people suggest with that too, and also how they describe it, because it's almost like you're selling it to the person as well. Like, they trust you, but they want to know, okay, well, you picked that one. Why did you pick it? And it's always fun hearing the way people try to describe something to someone. Like, okay, Brickey picked these 5 things, and now you have to say why I picked those 5 things. And the person's like, literally hanging on your every word, because they're trusting you with their 5-hour time slot. And they're like, okay, he sold me on why we have to do Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, I got it, So I want to see your description as well, because I think a lot of people, why World of Color is amazing, but trying to tell someone else why it is, is such a challenge sometimes for even cast members to actively describe something that you could say is hard. It's very difficult to do. The very basic, it's a water show.
Well, and if you describe too much, you kind of give away the element of surprise too. You don't want to tell people yo, it's a water show until it's a fire show.
or telling people that Mickey fights a dragon at the end. You're like, I kind of want you to see it come up on its own. So maybe leave that part out of it.
But everything that you're talking about, I understand, because I have friends that come to town and they're on tour with rock bands, or they're visual artists that are here in a very tight pocket of time. And I've literally had friends that have come, they paid full price ticket and they just wanted me to take them to the Haunted Mansion and back to the front gate, because that's all they had the time for. And they wanted to see it with the Nightmare Before Christmas holiday overlay. And so I absolutely know exactly what you're talking about. It'd be nice to have your friends from out of town from, 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. But sometimes you show up at 8 o'clock and you've got 5 hours to just strategically rip. And I have to say, Philander, one of my favorite things about being a quote unquote Disneyland expert is just buzzing through the park. You're like, okay, if I can get these people on a parade, and then we can just immediately hop on the Main Street train. Then we're going to go over 2 stops. We're going to get off over at Toontown. That's going to sneak us right back up on the backside. You know what I mean? Like, I love running it like the orchestra that it is. And, all of a sudden, Beth's like, what's the matter with you? I'm like, this parade is like 5 minutes off. And she's like, it's 5 minutes. I'm like, not to get good spots for Fantasmic. It's not. This is not good for me. And like, I'm just like, so I'm just jamming it the whole time in my mind. I'm like, okay, 5 minutes over here. And, it's just like, then you get the one person like, I want a corn dog. You're like, no, you don't. Corn dog destroys the whole schedule.
And then having to redo that schedule. That's one of the fun things about working there is the constant change to the itinerary. Because me personally, I'm technically never the one in control.
It's your guest, right?
It's trying to manage their expectations and wants for the day alongside things that just happen to come up,
right?
Which you do all the time. Like, I want to look in here and shop. I want to stop to get a corn dog. Oh my gosh, there's Pinocchio. Can we go and say hi? And then trying to reroute. And then sometimes they have to make choices depending on their time. Like, I got a plane to catch, so we've got only 2 hours left. So then we're like, okay, well, what can we even accomplish? And that's where you even think of like navigational things. Like, I like when the kids are like, we want to go all the way back to Incredicoaster. I'm like, well,
hey,
you
Disneyland Railroad only goes so far, Junior.
It's like, you can do that, but we're in New Orleans Square. Yeah. So like, we could make that there, but we may be shaving off 2 other things that you'd like to do. I remember a fun story before we get started. I was with a family, and they wanted to do one last thing before they left.
Right.
And the parents, just due to time constraints, and they had asked me in private because they wanted to do one last thing to the kids. Like, we have time for one more thing. Like, what's the closest thing to do? And this is on Main Street after picking up ear hats to leave. Well, I told them, well, the closest things that I would think are worth walking back up Main Street to do would be, for the kids, would either be Buzz Lightyear, Astro Blasters, or the Jungle Cruise. Tiki had to cut out because it's lengthy one, and also I don't know where they would be with their show when I got there. Like, we could get there and the door closed on us, and now you're waiting for that whole show to go. Astro Orbiter to me, while fun, I would not pose that as a worthwhile walk back up Main Street if I had Buzz and Jungle Cruise to choose. So I told the parents that made perfect sense to them. And I told them about how long each attraction lasted, what we would potentially be waiting for it as well. And they posed the question to the kids, and the kids could not argue could not decide what they wanted to do. So the parents ended up just leaving because they were arguing about it. Which I was like, that's good parenting. Like, they couldn't get it. Like, it was 2 kids, and they just could not. One wanted the other, one wanted one or the other, and they just could not get it. And they just left.
when I've taken the kids that I'm related to Disneyland, I just tell them what they're doing next, because I've realized that at Disneyland, it's very hard for kids to make decisions because everything's awesome, and they'll tell you this thing like, you'll be standing right in front of Smuggler's Run. They go, maybe we'll ride this after the teacups, and you're like, nope. You're here from New York. We have 5 hours. You're standing there. It's now or it is never, and it's like, it can come off a little brass at times. And I once had a family member where I had to explain to them, I'm like, look, it's cute you've been here once before and you think you know how it works. But I'm telling you right now, if you have to go get that shirt that you saw earlier today, that's pretty much the end of the evening, because by the time you get back to Main Street, shop, get in line, come back to us, you're not going to get to do the next 3 things I have planned for everybody. However, if you wait till midnight, shop your little heart out. And, it's just these moments where you kind of have to explain to people, like, I know you want a corn dog. It's on the other side of the parade route. That's going to be a very, it's going to be a corn dog you're going to work very hard for. So there's just these moments where you kind of have to, and I'm sure it's interesting with your job, where you're like, you have to kind of be like, I'm not trying to be a Disneyland bully, but trust me, you just don't understand how difficult what you're asking is in this particular pocket of the next 20 minutes.
All right. Like trying to decide.
Load me up. I'm ready, Captain. I'm fired up now. Now I can feel the force flowing through me.
All right. So first one, I wanted to get sure what you would say. So you're coming to the park.
Yeah.
We got Magic Happens, about to come up. I would say at about. He's like, I'm ready. Magic Happens.
I'm ready for that. I want to hear that song.
And no one has really sat down yet. I want to know, because these people are interested. You tell them you're coming in. You're like, the new parade's coming up. We've got time in our day of the things you would like to see. And you're telling your friends, and they say, okay, that sounds great, Brickey. Where should we see? I want to know, what 3 places do you think are the best to watch the parade at?
So easy. Okay, so first off, my rule as a parade is this, as a civilian. If you're going to watch on the sidewalk, don't get there any earlier than like 5 minutes before showtime. Because the rule is, if there's space inside that rope, people will act like they own all the space. But if there's space to stand, that's your space. So you just go under the rope and you just sit, you be polite to everybody and you try to make buds with them. And wasting 45 minutes for a parade route spot is a disastrous use of 45 minutes of precious time. And in that standing time, people get irritated, and that's when people start to give up on the magic, because they're just like, oh, when's this going to happen? Now, most of the parades are so amazing that you're like, you get that high after the parade comes through, and you're like, and I've had people literally be like, dude, I thought I hated parades, but thank you so much for making me stand here and do this. So 3 spots. My number 1 go-to is going to be, we're going to go up the stairs at the Main Street train station, and then we're going to go over either to the left or to the right in one of those 2 like viewing galleys. If you have your camera around and you're kind of cool, cast members won't bother you if you're standing over there. Dead center, you're not getting that spot. It's roped off for the Club 33 and the VIP types, which I'm giving everybody the Batman Vigilante Disneyland tour. So that's
you like the overhead look as it's coming around.
I do, because what I love if you couldn't get overhead, where it flat bottoms on either side, whether you're on the flag side or the train side, you get a nice long straightaway. It pauses right in that spot. And if you want to rip pics, you're going to be able to get a real good photo of either everything with Disneyland behind it, or it's centered in front of the train station. So that's my number 1 go-to spot. Now let's go to the very far end of the parade route, because my number 2 spot is the Small World Mall. Up on the stairs, it'll come out slow if it's the first parade of the day, so you get more time with the floats when you're up on those, like that little high area next to the old motorboat dock. You're up high, clean vantage points, kid on a shoulder, you're still taller than them, and it comes out slow or it's going back slow. So you get a little bit more time. Once again, you get that beautiful framework of the attractions with Small World behind you. And because it's a real kid area and it's flat and the berth of the parade route's pretty wide there, you normally get to catch magical moments of like kids interacting with the cast members and waving at princesses and blowing kisses. And there's been a couple of tears old man Brickey has shed in that area. Now those are really my favorite 2 spots. I try to steer clear of the hub. I try to steer clear of Matterhorn Way. I find it gets really congested in those spots. But if it's paint the night and it's right before fireworks, then we're going to try to work as close to the market house as possible, because that's going to get us in the crosshair of Main Street. And if we're looking at something like the 60th anniversary fireworks, Disneyland Forever, when the projection started, Center Street, as close to Center Street as possible, is where you want to be, because you get the 360 view of all of the effects. And not to mention, you're very close to seeing that little white weather balloon predict.
What's going to happen or not?
Is that a pros comment or what, man?
Yeah, everyone's like, look at where's the balloon going from?
Hey, if that balloon,
that's always a fun one to point out.
If that one stays in Main Street, we're good. If it goes wide right or wide left, grab the kids.
We're in trouble.
Manage expectations. Abandon ship.
Now, are those ranked for you as far as 1, 2, and 3 in the order that you gave them, as far as like your favorites?
Yeah, and the marketplace is really it's dependent on if we're watching a nighttime with a firework combo. But yeah, those are really my favorite spots to try to catch the parade.
And do you alter those at all slightly, or at all even really, if depending on if it's an evening parade or like a daytime parade?
The Small World is great to catch the holiday parade because you get the vignette of Small World with all of the Christmas lights and stuff on it. And I've also been able to time it perfectly where if you're on a really tight trip, and I had to do this after DesignerCon this year, I was actually able to get a crew of like a dozen artists off at the Toontown station, get them in line for Small World Holiday, and we watched the holiday parade while we were waiting in line. So I was just event stacking. So we could and they were like, when you told us that we were going to ride the train 1.5 times, we thought you were insane, but we trusted in Brickey magic, and you were so right. Like, how did you know we were going to get to watch the parade from? And I was like dancing in line because it all worked out for me. And I was like, yeah, that's Santa Claus. I know him. So yeah, I think that would probably be the way that I would go for it. But I've been a madman before, Philander, when I'm trying to film a parade, and I've actually been able to catch a parade at both Small World and Main Street, same parade, by starting one and getting to the other.
The madman. That's always such a fun one, because if I'm just out and about in the park and people ask questions about the parade, there's so many it's like when you can't leave with them and you're trying to kind of, because there are people that I actually been with, and then other people that they are just asking questions, and the ones that you can't walk with are always most interesting, because you're kind of have to they're going to leave you with what you said in their mind.
Yeah.
And you want to kind of try to break it down and give them as many possible options so they understand what it means. So a lot of times I always like to ask people if I'm not going to be with them and they're just questions, or like a friend is going to Disneyland, or where should you watch it? Sometimes I'll ask people, what the rest of their day looks like. Like, did you have like a dining reservation somewhere? What were your plans after the parade? Were you leaving? Like, a good one is with fireworks. I ask people, are you staying in the park or are you leaving like right afterwards?
Oh yeah, that's
to
a
beat
great
the crowds. Because I tell them, well, if you're leaving, I would try to watch it from the back of Main Street, so you're one of the people first out as soon as they end. Because if you're watching it from the castle, that's you've seen those crowds. That's a long walk.
Trail of tears
out of the the shuffle out. Yeah.
I always tell people too, coming in from out of town, I say, and this works if you have kids too, show up to the park as late as you need to get there to stay till midnight. Because I try to explain to people that after the fireworks, I call the fireworks crowd quitters. And after the quitters leave, every 5 minutes after the fireworks, conservatively, another 500 to 1,000 people have left. So you just keep getting more time to yourself. And Disneyland After Dark, as the events indicate, it is the most magical time to be there. So I always tell people, I know you're excited to get there early first in, but that means that you're going to burn out and you're going to miss out on some of the best hours possible. So it's a little bit of a different strategy. When people stay at my house, they're like, dude, it's noon. When are we going? I'm like, silence. Does the man with one leg make a sound when he kicks? And they're like, what is this? What is this, Yoda? I'm like, just trust me. I'm in the zone.
And I ask also people sometimes, like, they're seeing the 3:30 parade, let's say, and then they may have a reservation for, let's say, an early dinner at 5, or 4.
Yeah.
So I'll tell them, well, if that's the case, they need to see it right when it starts. So I'll tell them, okay, you got to be up at Small World because if you watch it from Main Street, that parade's not even going to get down to you until 3:45, 3:50. And then you have to watch the parade after that. Then not only that, you've got to work your way upstream from everyone coming down. Yeah. And now you have the potential of being late to that reservation. So it's like all these factors that come with just the navigational, because a lot of people think, well, I want to do these things, but they don't think about the time it takes to walk to that thing, then wait in line for that thing, then ride that thing, and then the time it takes to walk to that next thing. And it's just like so much is like constantly going to your head. It's like little things like that.
I love
I know you do.
I love that. I love that orchestra of Disneyland, and just when it's all playing and buzzing. You know, one of my greatest accomplishments is nailing coming out on the caterpillars of Alice, and like, yeah, there goes the Main Street Parade and a monorail and a Matterhorn. Bring it on. Layer me, Disney. Layer me.
Everything's moving around you. Teacups are spinning.
Oh, if I would have had one of those
go by.
If I would have had one of those sunset black crows land on my shoulder, I would have just maxed out.
All right, so here's another good one for you.
Okay.
And this one I'm very interested in because I think it's a good. We get you're in the park.
Yeah.
You're with your friends, and like, Brickey, we only have time for one nighttime spectacular. Are we watching Fantasmic or are we watching World of Color? We need you to tell us. We need you to sell us on one or the other. Why should we see one as opposed to the other?
So it really depends.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to evaluate it on the person because let's say they're like a Apple phone, Tesla tech type. I'm gonna take them over to World of Color because it's just so impressive from a technical point of view. If they have kids with them, I'm gonna probably take them over to World of Color because there's just so much audio and it's more contemporary, the content that's in there. And it's funny to watch little kids like wince when the whole fire thing happens. Like, my face is melting. But Philander, if it's one of my friends that I knew grew up loving heavy metal and playing with He-Man and just kind of being into like all of that stuff, I take them to Fantasmic and they go, "What are we doing?" I go, it's like a little boat parade for kids. Like, I set the expectations real low.
Real low.
And then they're like, okay, cool. And then it kind of gets a little trippy and, they start to see the effects happen on the water and like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I just stand there and all I do is I stare to the right because I just want to see the top of sailing ship Columbia come around the corner. Because the fact that they sneak a pirate ship, it's not an easy thing to sneak up on people. The pirate ship sneaks up, the cannon goes off. There's always somebody who next to is like, oh, and they look like they're having a heart attack. And I had a friend who is a pretty world famous tattoo artist, unbelievable fine artist. And we went there with him. And when the dragon came out and the river was on fire, he like looked over and goes, I can't believe I'm here without my boys. And I didn't know Disneyland was this awesome. Like, he's like choked up because he's like,
the Parents Guild.
There's a dragon in front of me lighting a river on fire. And after that was over with, all these art guys, just like, they look like bikers, long beards covered in hand tattoos. They're like, Disneyland is so sick. We get it now. We understand. Like, they were like blown away. So I think it really comes down to, are they techie or are they going to enjoy that arts and crafts vibe of Fantasmic? I really feel like that those are the 1-2 emotional punches. The fireworks are really, really great, but sometimes they hit a little bit of an emotional note that true Disney people get that strangers don't tend to.
Yeah.
But Fantasmic and World of Color are just magic tricks.
The fireworks, I left specifically out of that because one, and people always like, oh, when I say it, is Disneyland as far as entertainment has, I think, just naturally surpassed a firework show at this point.
Sure.
Like a lot of the things that are being added now complement the fireworks. I think Disneyland or Disney just in general does it great because they are able to combine multiple elements. So you get the projections, you get the music, you get other additional effects like lighting, snow, and to where you have this entire show as opposed to just shooting. Like, when it's funny when we play Fantasy in the Sky at Disneyland and it's that short original show from way, way back in the day, and it ends after 5 minutes, people are like, what happened? Was that it? Because they're so used to what they do now that even that original show, and I think it's 5 minutes long and no projections. The castle is just kind of like very dimly lit and it's very basic, and they are almost like, oh, that was it, because they're so used to things like Remember and Magical and the Christmas fireworks that they're almost stunned by it. And I always joke around with friends and say, when they were able to shoot fireworks in the air and make Walt's face out of them, then I'm like, okay, now they're doing some new stuff now, because most of the time it's the same thing. And then the fireworks shows are much shorter, so I know they're going to get way more bang for their buck out of Fantasmic and World of Color, because those are pushing almost 30 minutes of entertainment, while the fireworks usually are in between 10 to 15 minutes most of the time. So I will mention fireworks usually only if I can get them to have the parade complement like you mentioned.
Right. The 1-2 punch.
Or if it's like if I can get them, because when you watch Fantasmic, you can see them from Fantasmic.
Right.
So they get that kind of double back and front.
Yeah, you can double dip sometimes depending on what you're prioritizing. And, Disneyland Forever, when we celebrated the 60th anniversary for 3 years, I tried to get as many people as possible to see that fireworks show, because it is such a special fireworks show. And, the very beginning when they project the diamond over the park and you're now standing inside of the diamond for the diamond celebration. I mean, that one they did such a good job too of like combining the movies but also the story of Disneyland, because most fireworks skew either to the park or to the movies. And that one was really a 60-year celebration of everything that had happened there. And I love the step into the magic. And dude, bro, when it got to the end of that and they did the song double time, I was like, how do they get the magic to leak out of my eyes?
Right. And then you get the projection of Walt and Mickey walking through the castle.
Oh,
everyone's like, oh no.
Get out of here. And then that soul-crushing piano song that they'd play afterwards when the lights come up, and basically she's like, I know you want to cry, I'm going to push you over the edge, cry, Brickey Mouse, just cry. And just like, my dad's looking at me like, you've been here like 100 times and you still get weepy about this?
He's like, every time, always.
Oh,
yeah, man. You got the slow step into the magic, and then Ashley Brown's Kiss Goodnight came on, and that was like
1-2 punch.
Like two punch.
My heart can't take any more Disneyland.
I remember looking at my wife, because at the end that one always kills her. When Peter Pan says, I think he says at the end, Disneyland is yours forever.
Yeah,
and that one always ripped her.
I just got goosebumps you saying it. He says, just think, all of this is yours.
This is yours.
Forever. Oh, forever. It is mine. As long as I got that pass in my pocket. It is. Well, until the COVID, it was all mine. And now who knows?
All right, I got the next one for you.
All right,
that was a good one, though. That one's, that's such a, people are always like, which one? If they have one day, one night type of spectacular, and I like that you do discovery questions, or you look into like what the person is, how they're kind of feeling about it, because that sometimes makes all the difference. Like for kids, usually I lean more towards fan because I like the characters. I definitely have mentioned the tech aspect of World of Color, and how just watching it work is stunning. Like I think even just getting a chance to see, even without the water, the fountains moving in synchronization on their own, like if they were just doing a testing run without water involved, just watching that is beautiful.
In between scenes, when they let you just hear the water fall, and you're like, wow, that is so crazy, because you kind of forget about it after a while. I mean, in my heart of hearts, though, if I were to get back into the park, if they're like, hey, we're doing a one-night tester and you can see one of these two, I'm personally always going to pick Fantasmic, because I love the layering of that show, where it's like when we're looking at something on the water, they're building something on the island. And when we're watching someone on the island, they're queuing up the next thing on the water. And I just love the sleight of hand of a magic trick of, one part is always hiding the next piece. And I really love that sort of, it's more like watching a very elaborate children's school play. Whereas World of Color, you just imagine like 800 IMAX, like running the whole thing.
Just one big giant red button to start it, and that's it. Just sit back and watch.
Well, we got to shut down the computer farm for Midway Mania, and then it runs World of Color, and then we turn Midway Mania back on. All
right, this one is an itinerary one for you, which is fun.
Okay.
So let's say you're heading to the park.
Yeah.
You had friends meet you at the Grand. You guys had a delicious breakfast as storytellers. Cafe. You're heading to the park. You have breakfast around 9. Okay. You're heading to the park, and it's 10 when you get in. Come through the beautiful Grand Gate, which I always love. I love when you come in the morning. I don't know if you've been in there in the morning, and
of course,
Grizzly's running, and the fog is like kicking up from Grizzly, and it has like this like smoky air. That's awesome, and it's quiet still.
So
Like
I'm
no
in
one's really
DCA.
at that side of the park.
And I'm going through the Grand California entrance.
And you come out, and you've got 3 hours to do essentially the highlights of the park because you guys have a 1 p.m. lunch at Carthay.
Okay.
So not only what are you going to do, but what path are you going to take to do it? To, in your mind, get you back to Carthay at 1 o'clock.
Okay. And do I have children with me, or is it just adults? Tell me it's just adults.
Just adults.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
It's just adults.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just adults. It's a bunch of friends of yours from out of town.
Out of town.
You sold them on Carthay. Told them it's amazing. A lot of history in there, of course, which is amazing. But that's kind of your setup. You just got to get them there by 1, and they just want to see the highlights. They're entrusting you with showing them the best that DC has to offer with that about 3-hour time period. I would say it's also for your thoughts on the attractions. It's not a particularly busy day. Obviously, let's just say the longest wait is about, let's say it's January.
Okay. I'm getting the
Park's
vibe.
empty. Yeah, 30
vibe.
minutes is probably the highest wait for the attraction, like for the park. Like the park is doing like DC is doing like a 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. January, nice slow season.
Okay. This is the path that I'm going on. I'm going to come out of the entryway and I'm going to take a right, but then I'm eventually going to turn right on that left-hand turn where it used to be where everybody would smoke. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So immediately I'm just taking them on. I'm taking them on a lap on the backside of Grizzly Peak, so that they can.
It's a beautiful area.
So they can get a sick pic in front of the waterfalls. They can see people having fun. We're gonna cruise around now, and we're gonna show them the cat because people are just like, "How does he know that a cat lives there?" So I show them the 2 cats that live right over there. And the first things first, they're in from out of town. We're gonna just go do Soarin'. And I'm going to say this to them. What do you think we're getting ready to do? Because I'm not going to tell them what it is. What do you think? And they're like, oh, it's probably like you like sit in an airplane, you ride around. I'm like, yep. Whatever they tell me, I go, yep, that's what we're doing. So then I'm going to go to the cast member. I'm going to go, can we please get the middle section, front row, top row, if possible?
E1.
I want to be right in the middle. So we go and we do that, and then they're like, oh my God, California's sick. And hopefully it was Soarin' over California and not World. Mm-hmm. But World's good too, although that Eiffel Tower and Taj Mahal needs a little bit of work. So now we pop up, and I'm going to just take them on a quick walk through the Hollywood lot. We're just going to walk down Sunset there and just kind of observe it all. But I'm like, we don't really want to get into riding anything, blah, 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 blah. And then we're going to come over to Guardians. And we're going to, there's not a single rider on Guardians, right? Okay. So we're going to allot our biggest amount of time for Guardians. But if they're friends of mine, they're probably into Marvel, they're probably into movies, they're probably in the entertainment industry somewhere, and they will really get a kick out of that. So that's going to eat up a lot of our time. Now, Avengers Campus isn't open yet, so we're going to, unfortunately, we have to backtrack the way that we came. I know. We have to backtrack. But the beauty in the backtrack is that when we come back around the bend, for the first time ever, they're going to see the majestic Radiator Springs. And I'm going to take them straight down Route 66, single rider line. That's going to be 25 minutes or so. We're going to see each other when we line up the race. I'm like, oh, look at you. You're with that family. I'm with this family. Sick. They have convicts riding in the car with them. And then we're racing. And then when we get done with our race, I'm going to take them out the far way so we get to see the second archway that takes us over into the Pacific Wharf area.
Yes.
And then they're going to go, Midway Mania, I love Toy Story. I go, no. Not today you don't. Not today you don't.
Not today.
I'm like, you don't want to get stuck in this line. It's really, really fun. But I will lie to them about motion sickness. And I'll say, if you had to ride the Incredicoaster, maybe I'll let them go that way. But what I'm going to probably try to do is just do a walkthrough Pixar Pier. And then around the backside, I'm going to do Ariel because it's quick, it's magic, it's dark ride, and it's a quick win. So in my 3 hours, I was able to give them 4 attractions and pretty much see a majority of DCA and how it runs. At that moment, I feel quite confident taking them over to Disneyland and be like, we don't need to go back over there for the rest of the day. That would be my loop that I would go with. If they're hardcore roller coaster people, I might adjust it because I know people really like the Incredicoaster. I only rode it one time, and my review was this: Beth, if I throw up, put it on Instagram. That's all I can get out.
My phone, get it.
But
it's coming.
If they want to ride it, I will crush some Jack Num Nums, no doubt about it.
It's like, I'll take a picture of you at the launch.
Absolutely. But that would be my dream loop. If I could get my guests from out of town to feel the magic of Soarin', and I would tell everybody the entire story of, this used to be when we're over at Guardians. This was originally not built for this, and sort of give them the magic of how rides evolve. Also explain to them how the elevator shaft system works. Radiator Springs, I would explain to them, this is a combination of a lot of other technology. This is the park growing, and just, really kind of break that all down. And then walking through the pier, you can just point out all the little fun facts, like, hey, I interviewed the lady that designed this beautiful emotional whirlwind. But then we're gonna bend back around, and I think Aerial is a really great way to close it out and just get that easy win, because people are always happy when they're in and out in 15 minutes.
I love that you included Aerial too, because I think it's always important for someone visiting Disneyland to make sure they do some type of dark ride, even if it's just one,
right?
Because that's such a quintessential Disneyland or Disney attraction experience, where you just sit back and let them tell a story around you. Especially, even hats off if you can make an omni mover, like that is always great. But I love you put Aerial in there for that reason, because you could pick, I think, so getting racers is always really important, or just even a walk through Cars Land is just for people to see, because it's, and I'm sure you've seen when you bring people to Disneyland, they believe they have an idea of what they're going to expect, but then are usually consistently blown away because they didn't think it was going to be that much more detailed or that much more fun, based off of whatever they had in their head. Because I think people think of the family or kiddie aspect of Disneyland mostly, and not the attention to detail, the believability of these locations. Like, that part is always right over the head.
Philander, what I used to do with people is I would take them over to Tower, and then I would bring them through Bugs Land. And right when we got to the edge of Bugs Land, where it's tough to be a Bug Theater was, I would always make sure that I would position myself on the left side of the group, and I'd just be like pointing over at, because I would love to do this. I love pointing at the backside of the Grizzly Peak Mountain and say, most amusement parks would build a wall or build a fence. Disneyland builds a mountain to divide the park in two halves. So even though right now you're seeing a waterfall and trees and all this, you're really looking at a giant partition to emotionally separate it. And because they're so dumb and they're looking in that direction, they never look back over at Radiator Springs. So therefore, I can roll them all the way around the back park. I can take them through the pier, and then the very last thing I do is I take them through Pacific Wharf, and I walk them in Radiator Springs through the back way, through the Grand Arch. And they're walking through the Grand Canyon. They see flows. And then when you're standing in the middle of the cross street and 66, and you look up and down, you're like in the middle of it. And that was always my favorite way to sneak people in there, because once you see Radiator Springs, the rest of the park it's good, but you've already seen the best. Yeah.
That's like always the people that I have been in the park, family or friends, that want to start with racers. And I was like, well, this is like peak DCA attraction. Other ones are great, obviously, but this is like so much all at once. Or people used to say that after getting off of Rise Resistance, like, well, it's like not all the queues are going to be like that. Just so you know, it's this is like higher end.
We were talking about Rise of the Resistance on the show the other day, or on one of my live streams, and somebody said I was group. I got it, and I was like group 4, and I was like, if you're basically group 10 or under, you're not even part of the Resistance. You know what I mean? Like, you're basically first order if you're in one of the 10 groups that rides it. You're not resisting anything.
You are already on the starter's career.
Yeah, it's like, I don't trust that intel, bud. Yeah, you're absolutely right, though, because riding racers first is like, if let's say that, reincarnation was real, and an angel's like, So you want to start off rich and die poor, or do you want to get rich at the end of your life? I'm like, I want to build the wealth, bro. I don't want to start. I don't like once I've had the silver spoon, I don't want to take it out of my mouth. And that's riding racers first is exactly that.
Yeah, that's why I think in my normal navigation of going with like either working or family or friends is always doing either the pathway that you took with Soren or starting out with the pier, with racers always being in the middle all the time, just from its position in the park as well.
Right.
And then working my way around that way to get to it. That way, I always hoped I could get them to convince them to the pier side, just because that would have me take them through the wharf, through that archway specifically. When you think of the different ways you can access these lands, some of them at least, that was always a favorite, just because if they didn't know, they just knew that was a big ride or a next big thing we were doing. They always would get surprised by that. The keyhole that we talk about all the time, the blessed keyhole, where they get what is this? Like, oh, look at the rocks here, and then they're like, oh, and then they always want to take a picture right there.
Sometimes Red hangs out there too for photo ops, and that really does a great bit of storytelling. But hey, here's what people hate about me is that I don't watch the movies. And so, Philander, for a long time when I would ride Ariel, I'm like, come on, it's Disneyland. When are they going to fix the two eyes on these ills that have burned out?
Not knowing that one of them was supposed to be like
Ariel. I'm like, come on, man. You'll either like take both of the eyes out and have one lit out and one dark. And I kept waiting for him to fix it. And then one day I was Googling something and I saw a photo. I'm like, you really should watch the movies, you idiot.
It's like they just can't get these eyes to work properly.
All right, fire me out with the next one. I'm loving this.
All right. You have a choice.
Okay.
And let's say this is, we'll go with different times of the day. So you have a choice. You're rope dropping Disneyland with your buds. They've never been before. And you have a choice of doing one or the other. You can't mix it up.
Okay.
And this counts. Let's take the Rise boarding group out. It has been 3 years now. It's just part of the thing. Gets a big weight, of course, because it should always. But it's the no more boarding group. Do you start Disneyland clockwise or counterclockwise if you're rope dropping in the morning?
I like to go counterclockwise because Tomorrowland is the worst of Disney, and it gives you the capability of getting the worst part over with fastest. Now, I'm not necessarily a rope drop guy. I'm more of an evening guy. So I get to walk through and get the ambiance of Tomorrowland at night because it's all lit up and the music's like, it looks like something's happening. But when you kind of try to dig into it, nothing really is happening. And then I like the idea of going in that direction. If I was maybe rope dropping, though, I could see the appeal of going, Adventureland, Frontierland first. But I feel like starting off in Tomorrowland, especially if you have an adult group, it just gets better and better as you work your way around the circle. Because Galaxy's Edge is very fulfilling. So is New Orleans Square. Adventureland isn't a bad place to end strong if you could do Jones. And, if you were literally doing everything and stand to the circle, you would just want to sit on the Jungle Cruise and almost smoke an imaginary cigarette like I've had a hell of a day today.
We did it. Pass out in the tiki room. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we did it.
I would go that way. And also, if it's a rope drop situation, fun fact, Tomorrowland has the best breakfast sandwich you'll ever have. That
I have heard you bring this up before.
Oh my Lord. They're just like, this is like, oh, let's put everything on bun and people will love it. And they were right. People do love it.
That's always an interesting one. Now, do you change that if it's the evening?
No, I pretty much always kind of stay that path. But I will walk across the top of Fantasyland, but I really like if I'm going there with people from out of town and they want to ride stuff, I don't really dip my toes in Fantasyland until 11 p.m.
Yes, you did mention that.
Because the table's been reset because of the fireworks. The kids have gone home and you can literally crush everything. And then 11:58 is when I stand in line for Peter Pan, unless I'm getting some sort of specialty treatment. You might know about that.
Maybe a little bit. Now, do you walk through? Now, would you walk through Fantasyland to Galaxy's Edge, or would you dip down Matterhorn Way in front of the castle, going into either Frontierland or Adventureland?
I really like taking the. I love showing people what I refer to as the outer hub, which is the trail that takes you around like Snow White. It starts over by the Pixie Hollow, and you can essentially stay on that trail, and you can either get off at Frontierland or you could go even further over to Adventureland. I really love taking people on that trail because there's typically nobody on it, especially when you get over by Pixie or Fantasy Fair. It's generally pretty abandoned. People are like, Brickey knows this like VIP route, and you're just cruising, and you keep looking over at the hub, and it's full of people, and in front of the castle it's like 1,000 selfies are going off, and so you're just cruising in that outer hub. And I love to stop and show people the Peter Pan tree, and you're dipping from land to land. And now that they've really expanded it over on Frontierland, I love taking that way. And in fact, Philander, to bring up this, a year ago when they were doing the 4 groups, 4 different time slots for Galaxy's Edge, I took a Club 33 member, a Disneyland film director, a Disneyland artist, and 2 other people. I took them that way, and my bud Carrie's is like, I've been coming here forever, and Brickey still knows things that I don't even know. And they were like, where are we going? And when we ended up by going that route, because we had like a 4 o'clock slot, and it was just jammed with people. When we ended up over at the edge of Tomorrowland, they're like, how did we get here from Tomorrowland? Because you had to go over to Launch Bay to get your bracelets. And many people just stay to Launch Bay because it's so sick. They're like, Galaxy's Edge, who cares? I'll stay over here. But for those of us that went on, we went that way. And I love taking that path. I refer to it as the outer hub. I think it's just such a time saver. I love that it's there.
And people, I feel that way where you said by the Peter Pan tree is like that. When I walk people down past Bibbidi under the castle, people are like, whoa, but that way too. Or when you walk them through Fantasy Fair past Rancho de Zocalo,
yes,
they're like, where are we at? Especially if it's like you said, if it's like a nighttime, when it's like completely devoid of people now, because people are committing themselves either going home or some nighttime entertainment. It's like dark and quiet, and or especially when Fantasy Fair is like they're done for the night and the area is like empty, and you walk past Rapunzel's tower. Yeah, they're like, where are we going?
That way, and you hit a good restroom that normally doesn't have a super long line for the ladies. So you go through that main artery, and if you do it right, it spits you out at the Rivers of America. The only time when you wouldn't want to do that, that's one of those things where you got to be like, Fantasmic's happening. Got to go all the way. Got to commit to Adventureland. Or, the beautiful thing about Galaxy's Edge now is it gives us a way to circumvent and go around Rivers of America.
Yes.
Which you want to talk about being a nerd. People were like, we're going to get Rise of the Resistance. I'm going to be excited about Smuggler's Run. I was like, we finally get to do an entire loop. No more getting stuck back in Hungry Bear and coming back around, going back. So, that would be the path that I would go. But man, I can't wait to re-navigate those trails. I love it so much.
One of our hard and fast rules there too was if someone wasn't interested in watching Fantasmic, to knock out the west side first because of what Fantasmic ends up doing to that side of the park with them taking away all the main walkway arteries, because it's a tightly compact area. So if they were not watching Fantasmic, we were starting on the west side, so that part was done as far as them wanting to do everything at least one time, and we wouldn't have to be trying to navigate that side of the park during Fantasmic. Another reason for me while working would be their interest in Splash Mountain. If I knew they were interested in that, because I could very easily convince someone to do it when it was still hot and the sun was out, as opposed to if it was now, I started Tomorrowland side and walked around. By the time we even got to Splash Mountain, now you're talking it's like 7 at night.
Right.
And now, if they were going to do it, they are not now because it's dark and it's cold.
Yeah.
So I always kept that in my mind too. Like, was that something they were actively interested in? Like, oh, we're not getting wet today. Like, people have told me that flat out at the beginning. Like, we're good. No grizzly, no splash. I'm like, all right, that's fine. But if they were, and I started in California Adventure, we were going to Disneyland, I would know that, and I would start on the west side, because by the time, let's say, you entered Disneyland, it'd be like in the early afternoon. I'm like, I got to get them on splash now, because if I do it counterclockwise, by the time we get over there, nope, they're not gonna be like, oh, it's too cold now. And now, inadvertently, and they would not necessarily blame me per se, but I'd be like, I technically kept them from getting on splash because I chose to walk them the opposite way.
Yeah. So
it's like, again, those, what we said, those little things like that are always like, oh, you know, you're thinking so much about how to make these decisions. You know, and I know those people that will get on splash at like 10.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And they don't care. And I'm like, how do you not care about leaving with wet jeans? Like, I know the physical effects of that. It's not fun. And for people who don't know this, fun fact, the plaid vest is completely Scotch guarded and waterproof. And Philander has a whole collection of photos of him taking the splash, and there's just little beads all over him. Family's drenched. He gets out. Hey,
they bounce off.
Look at me. I'm slick. So here's how you use Phantasmic in your favor if you're doing the quick rip.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken people before along the outer edge of Adventureland. For whatever reason, people with strollers love hanging out in front of Indiana Jones. And
Why is that?
I don't know. It's like the number one favorite place to congregate.
Mm-hmm.
So I take people along the high road, and then I backtrack in to Pirates. Right when Phantasmic's getting ready to start, we do Pirates, and it's a walk.
Done that. Yep.
I pop them out, and then I take them over to the Haunted Mansion, and then we rip through that. And if I plan it right, when we come out of the Haunted Mansion, we walk straight over to like Fowler's Harbor and take a little slight right, and it's just in time for them to see the fire, the dragon, and I've been able to do that before with people. And you want to talk about a strong, half hour. If you time it right and you do Pirates when the mass crowd's waiting for it to start, you do a quick Haunted Mansion rip, and you can get there and get the end of the show. People's heads are spinning around because that is a serious Disneyland 1, 2, 3 punch. But I never even equated a responsibility of trying to time when people would get over to Splash Mountain, because I only ride it when people are in from out of town and they insist upon it, because I've done it and it's just not worth walking around with wet jeans.
It'll be interesting to see once it's turned over to Tiana, how people will look at it. Like, it's like, oh, well, now I have to go on and get myself wet because I need to see this new thing,
For crazy of an attraction it is, it's always had an insanely long wait on warm weather. I feel like this rebranding of it is going to make it insane for quite a while, like for a really, really long time. And, once again, people hate when I say this, but I don't know the context of the boat and the tree, but I'm so excited to see that rebuild up there. And I think that is such cool problem solving, how that's all going to come together. So I'm really excited to see how that comes together, but I think it's going to make that probably not the way that I go to Galaxy's Edge for at least the summer.
It's like, I'm not going to walk by that way.
No.
I'm going to go past Big Thunder. All right, let me see. What's your next one here? Oh, there's another time crunch one.
Okay, I love
I know you enjoy. So you're gonna be going to Fan.
Okay.
So you're gonna see Phantasmic.
Okay.
But the way you kind of planned out the day is you're gonna be with Buds in California Adventure, or let's say downtown Disney. Probably that, like, they wanted to potentially go out and get a drink with their dinner.
Okay.
So it's either they wanted little some spirits with their dinner. So it's going to be either DCA or downtown Disney, or potentially hotels. And you're going to see the 9 o'clock Phantasmic, because after that you're going to be doing your Disneyland twilight time period where you run them around.
Let all the quitters leave and just start crushing.
So they want a decent table service meal with alcohol, of course, to go along with it. What location would you take them to, and what time would you try to hit the reservation at to get them to Phantasmic at 9 o'clock on time?
Wow, that
and it's not in Disneyland.
Okay, so that takes out. Okay. So we got to get. They want to drink, and we want to time a 9 o'clock show to Fantasmic. So
You got to get there, yeah.
we want to be leaving a restaurant in downtown Disney at 8:30, 8:15. Like, I just want to be completely safe about it. So probably what I'm going to recommend, because of its ambiance and its menu, is I'm going to probably say that we're going to eat at the bowling alley there. Because
Splitsville, all right.
Splitsville's got good vibes. If they're in from out of town, there's like cool California stuff to take a pic in front of, and it feels like a party's happening. So if I want to get out of Splitsville at 8, we'll say 8:30, then I'm probably going to make that reservation for like 6:45. Just, I like to play everything nice and safe. Now, Splitsville gets me in an interesting situation, because if I get out of there and I can look and see where the monorail's at, I might be really tempted to take a monorail back into the park, go around Fantasyland, dip through the castle, come around like how we talked, go through Fantasy Fair, pop out at the Mexican restaurant there, and then we're right at Rivers of America. And then I'm going to go over to a cast member, and they're going to go, do you have a ticket? I go, no, but we really want to see it. Is there any place where we can stand?
Oh, come on.
Because I always get there too late to get that fast pass. So I'm always kind of like, wait till it starts, the rope goes away, and we go into the back. But yeah, that's probably how I would. But an evening dinner, leaving the park, it gets really, really tricky.
That is a huge thing that I have done with so many, like, not even just either work or with family and friends, where people have, and it's such an, you almost expect if someone, they're going to want an adult drink with dinner. Like, I don't blame them, especially after a long Disneyland day. You've been there 10 hours, 11 hours, and getting back into the park, like having to like think about the distance going through the turnstiles again. You don't even know how many will be open, how long that will be. And if you're getting the fan too, that means you're going to be potentially walking down through people prepping for fireworks also.
Oh, it's a nightmare scenario.
And choosing restaurants like that are table services. I like you did Splitsville, because I believe that they, based off of just knowledge of their operation, they would be able to get a quick meal out. Like, I like to suggest Carthay to people, but the way they run their kitchen is like a slower, more paced service.
If you go to Carthay, that's almost your evening event. And if you get anything bonus, if they let you go out on the balcony and see like Paint the Night go by or catch the fireworks, it's a bonus. But I feel like when you go to Carthay, like, that is your evening entertainment.
Because then I would have to put it like at potentially 6 o'clock, because Carthay loves to do the whole show with their thing. Like, it's a big deal for them, and trying to crush their service down really quickly is really tight. So I don't even suggest that. Going as far back as like Lamplight Lounge, that's like, ooh, that's a distance now. Like, I wouldn't like,
because you're essentially going through the core of one park to the core of another park.
Yeah. Like, those are the things that people just, you don't think about it. Like, the meal at Lamplight's going to be great. You're going to enjoy yourself.
Oh, the best cheeseburger in the park.
But just that distance, and that's only just like, because you're placing so much on the wait staff at that point and the restaurant itself.
Right.
And like you said, always taking care to give yourself that extra time, because you just don't know, and you're putting a lot of pressure on things that you're just not in your control at all.
The fastest premium restaurant, the one that is premium and is experienced, but they pump you in and out, is Blue Bayou. Out of all the like more experiential places you'd eat, that's the one that's got speed on its side, because it's valuable real estate. Like, you're inside Disneyland. But if you're doing Carthay Circle, Napa Rose, Steakhouse 55, if you're lucky enough to go to Club 33, like, all of those things, that's your entertainment for the evening. And any bonus that you get before or after that is great, but it's almost like you go there to do those things. And I sort of pitch it to people. I'm like, I know Docking Bay 7's not exactly what you had in mind, but, is our priority a great meal or to keep crushing Disneyland events?
It's all those discovery questions.
Yeah,
I need to know all of these different factors so that I can help you make the premium decision, and so we know, like a good restaurant, like a place that has saved me tons of times just from them not only having a space to get into pretty quickly without having to make a reservation far in advance and then get out really quickly has always been Storyteller's Cafe, because they do their buffet dinner.
I love it.
So I know that not only will the family that I'm with or friends, they get sit down to a pretty decent meal, not necessarily like as good as Carthay or whatnot or Blue Bayou, but it's buffet, so they don't have to wait for the food to be cooked. They turn tables quickly because you're not waiting that long for that service, and it puts you in a pretty decent proximity to get back to World of Color in time, or still even get back to the park if you walk through downtown Disney, kind of like if you were going to Splitsville or whatnot.
Right.
So that's always been a good one. But it's always such a people are like, well, can we go to Steakhouse 55 and then I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to Steakhouse 55, it's probably my birthday. And when we're done eating, we're just going to take a celebratory lap around Disneyland and soak up the Christmas vibes. I'm not doing Steakhouse and then trying to stack like candlelight procession after it. Like I'm not like an insane person that thinks you can, because Disneyland is A, B, or C, D, all of the above. That's not on the table. That doesn't exist. It's always, are you picking this or are you picking that? My pro tip about Storyteller is that if you're doing an all-day rip, you're going from 8 a.m. to midnight, start in DCA, crush DCA. Then when you're done with DCA around 2 o'clock or so, go to Storyteller, because you're still on the lunch pricing. You get ice cold AC, you get a booth to sit in, you get table service, so you don't have to make weird decisions while you're standing in line. Very clean and private bathrooms to recharge your human. And I just find that if I can get the crew that I'm with to do a nice AC service 2:30 lunch at Storyteller, it's almost like I can look at them like an iPhone, and I can see their little battery go from red to yellow to green, and then they're ready to go rip the second half of the day.
Oh, the reset is so
crucial,
important.
Man.
So important.
And I also tell people this is one of the best pro tips I know. If you're going to Disneyland on a max capacity day, a Christmas, a Thanksgiving, a 24-hour party, make a reservation at a restaurant in the park, because you're guaranteed to get access even if the park is sold out. You go up to the gate and say, look, here's my phone. I have dinner reservations here at 7 o'clock. Even though the park's sold out, you're still getting in. Those reservations are crucial to guaranteeing access.
Yeah, make sure you don't get stuck out. Everyone's always worried about, like, if we leave, is this going to be it? Like, oh.
Philander, when I go back in, whenever this is over with, that's it. I'm not leaving again. They've already locked me out once for 100+ days. I'm going in there, and I'm now just a Rivers of America person. Like, I just live in the river. Whatever I fish out, whatever. Like, if sometimes I get a fish, sometimes I get an old turkey leg. I'm just living off the Rivers of America.
Living on Tom Sawyer Island as well.
100%.
He's like the bushes.
Where I come from, that was already more than what I was destined to have. So I was born to be a river person. I'm going to die a river person right there.
There's old man Brickey out on the boats in the morning.
I'll be this generation's Mike Fink. I'll gladly do it.
That'll be your cabin over in the corner.
Yeah. Oh, it's on fire again! Ah, damn it!
Like, who's that guy? Oh, that's old man Brickey. He lives here now.
Whatever you do, don't let him tell you a story, because it's way too long.
It's gonna go on for a long
Yeah,
time.
I'd love that.
All right, let me see. What's next for you? Okay. All right, you are going. All right, you got some friends in town. This is the first time they've ever been. They brought their kids. Kids are like, okay. I had to give you one kid one. They brought their kids. One is, let's say, you got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. 7-year-old's tall enough to do everything, but you got the 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus just the one question, 3-year-old. What is the first attraction you put that 3-year-old on? They've never been to Disneyland, and they've never done an amusement park, anything before. This is pure first theme park Disney thing experience. What is the first ride you put them on?
So this is a crucial question, because if you break the child, you don't win their trust back again.
Nope.
So Disneyland Railroad might be applicable if we don't go into that was the Grand Canyon today. Now I'm going to scare the hell out of you, little baby. I love that soundtrack so much. Somebody pointed out that parts of that soundtrack are also in A Christmas Story, which is pretty fascinating. I think, man, kids love Winnie the Pooh, but the storyline of Winnie the Pooh is like, it's really, really rainy. Let's go get really high. And then suddenly it's your birthday. So I think probably what I would do with the kid is It's a Small World feels like Christmas. It feels like toys. The music can be a little loud, but it's not like abrasive. They're floating in a boat. I feel like It's a Small World would win a child over because Dumbo could kind of maybe create a little bit of motion sickness that could kind of get them going. And
height too, yeah.
Yeah, and like Alice in Wonderland is great, but it can be a little noisy and distracting at times. So I feel like Small World is a safe bet. But then if we want to go a little bit more adult, I've also seen young kids have a really good time on the Jungle Cruise because we identify the alphabet with animals and it's not constant noise. It does have mellow moments, especially if your skipper reads the room and can be quiet. But I would be worried about like the cap gun and can get a little rowdy at times. And also, if the skipper's playing more to the adults and they start to do the boat and reverse moves and all that stuff, a little kid doesn't know that we're riding on a track and could get a little panicky. So I'm seeing Small World is probably the safest bet. But I know babies love Launch Bay.
A lot of crawl space.
Have fun, man. Have fun.
This is always such an interesting one because the parents are almost like putting their trust in you because they don't know either. Right. And you're almost like, well, I don't know your kid. So I'm asking like these discovery questions of, well, let me see, because I have seen in my time kids come crying off of absolutely every attraction, including Small World before. Sure. For different reasons. Like it's such an interesting thing with each kid and how they feel about it specifically, because Peter Pan, as amazing as can be too dark for one kid, or like you said, Dumbo motion sickness or being up high. That spin, like you said, is wild. Small World is usually a safe bet because you can kind of count it as a dark type ride, but it is completely lit inside. The music is great because it is a repetitive tune that someone could hook onto. Thank you, Sherman Brothers. And it is it's light, and it's like a light song that kind of bounces along with it. The boat is slow. Another big one is getting to sit sandwiched in between your parents. I always have to remind everyone I go with, doesn't matter if I'm working or not, the fact that your kid has to ride alone in front of you on Matterhorn. And if they do that, like, it's different riding, getting to hug your niece or your nephew, your son, your daughter on Big Thunder or Space. But when the kid is in front and they cannot see you at all,
they're on their own.
Moments, they're on their own. Like, you're behind them. That's
an adult moment for a kid. Yeah, you think about that.
And they're like, you're going up and it's dark, and the Yeti's like, whoa, you see him on the ice on the side, and the kid's like, what is going on?
There's nothing worse than the first 30 seconds of a ride when your human goes, you've made a mistake.
Yep.
Because then all you want is the next 2 or 3 or 4 minutes to be over as fast as possible. I didn't say the storybook boats because I know that young kids are very afraid of strangers. They don't know yet how to order their own drink. And that ride can be very intimidating when you're just touching knees with somebody you've never met before. Although the pacing of that one is nice. But then again, with today's kids that are being raised on iPads, I don't know if that might be more of an adult ride as it transitions, because we understand miniatures and model making, whereas kids are just like, what does it do? When's it going to talk to me?
Yeah, a ride where you go on and nothing is moving, like everything is in its place, like that can be considered by many to be young kids to be super boring nowadays, where at least in Small World, are the things you've got at least audiomatronics or some kind of physical, there's some kind of kinetic energy in the attraction.
To you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Small World is usually the best bet. I love that you had a Jungle Cruise in there. Besides, obviously, the Cap Gun, which that's going to scare them or not, or the piranhas at the end. It's pretty tame, Otherwise, I've never seen kids just usually aren't worried about that, but I have seen where you're putting a lot of emphasis on that kid, and they're like, oh, because I've seen them where the parents want to start with the things they grew up with, pirates, Haunted Mansion, and you're like, oh,
dude, I took my nephew. Granted, here's a kid that when he was like 4, I showed him what Kiss was, and he loved it. So I got him a Kiss action figures and a Kiss blanket, and everything that he wore had a skull on it. I showed him how to draw a skull. Everything he wears has a skull on it. Like, the kid loves skulls. The first drop in Pirates, and he was like done. He wanted to get off the boat. Like, it doesn't work that way. You got to do the whole thing. And when we came around the corner of the skeleton and the storm, and he's at the steering the ship there at the mast, he like full on like cried. And I saw a motherly part of Beth that I still haven't seen before. I'm like, you're hugging a crying child? Who is this woman that I married? We're just not kids people. And my nephew was broken. And you have to manage your expectations with kids at Disneyland because they're emotionally numb the whole day. They don't know how to verbalize what's going on. And I've learned that kids love Disneyland the day after when they can start to tell the story in their own words. But when they're there, you're just like, are you alive still? Breathe. Blink if you're still with me. And I've really learned to have to manage my expectations with kids because Disneyland kind of crushes them and breaks them in a way that you're, as an adult, you're like, we're going to go there. It's going to be sick. We're going to do 16 hours. 6 hours in, like, one of my favorite things about being a guy who shuts it down is I love seeing the parents are like, I paid $125. I ain't leaving till 1 a.m. And their kids look like heroin addicts in the strollers. It's like just all the kids that are like just everywhere. Like, it's crazy. And I once had to haul a 6-year-old that was numb from, you can't take the stroller past downtown Disney.
Yep.
That's a long haul, man.
It's a long walk.
That is a long haul.
You see those kids are all on the shoulders of the parent. Like, that's the best sleep you'll ever get in your life is those kids that leave Disneyland. They're out and then they wake up the next day at home.
Yeah.
And don't even realize how they got there. It's so much stimulation. Yeah, the music, the attractions, lights, characters, balloons, bubbles,
other people, just the crowds. Yeah, I grew up touring in bands and doing music festivals and being on tour and being in venues every night. So the chaos of Disneyland just feels like a second home to me. Like, I can go to any event and I don't get, I'm not afraid of crowds or whatever. Like, I can just sort of like, I know how to just be like, well, this is my 2 feet of earth. And if I just focus on this 2 feet of earth, I don't have to worry about everything around me. But, if Beth hasn't been there for a while, she's like, oh man, I always forget when I come back here how much chaos happens at Disneyland.
Like controlled chaos going on. Like, we know what's going on and where people are going to, how they're moving there, but it looks like to the person who hasn't been in a while, like Beth, or the first timer, they're like, what is happening?
I know. And I always tell people, like, trust me, these people know how to run humans like nobody else. They also somehow have created the magic of masking tape. They just put masking tape down on the ground and people are like, this is where a line starts. This is how we now flow. But Philander, we were sitting at home Thanksgiving. This goes back years. Thanksgiving 2019. Maybe you remember that time. It feels like emotionally a decade ago.
It's like 20 years ago.
20 years ago, it was Thanksgiving 2019. And it was cold and it was rainy and we made all of our food and we're kind of sitting around. We don't have any family out here. And I just pulled out the app and I go, Disneyland's empty right now, Beth. And she goes, I could maybe go for an evening Disneyland rip. So we texted a bud of ours who we knew was kind of looking to get into something. And the three of us, we walked around a rainy, cold, and desolate Disneyland. There was nobody anywhere. And that was the first night that I saw that the cast members in Galaxy's Edge have those indoor rain slickers.
Oh yeah, the like indoor green.
Yes, with like kind of like the airbrushy camo. And we were able to just walk into Oga's and it wasn't crowded, and we were able to sit where we wanted to. And man, oh man, those are just magical locals nights when you're like, it's cold and it's raining. The app says nobody's there. I can't get there fast enough.
Yeah, I'm on the way right now. They're open late. I can do it.
You look over where I was sitting, there's just two little smoke clouds.
It's out.
I'm on my way.
It's nice having that kind of like, I always look at, it's interesting to look at people who have the local or the person who's been there before, and then the individual who's on a vacation, the different states of relaxation or pressure on that trip. Which is why I know why so many people end up doing like tours, because it's such a chaotic, like, or even asking like, Brickey, I need you to just take me because I'm not even sure what the heck I'm doing. And, I know, so I'm just going to go with you. Like, I totally understand that. Some people I don't have the time to research it. And there's such a pressure that comes with it, or not even knowing what's good. I mean, Disney also does a fantastic job of hiding everything. So, while the ride says Pirates of the Caribbean on the outside, you're like, well, what the heck is that? Like, it doesn't say, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. People have a fear that they're going to do it wrong, that they're going to miss something, or they're going to do it backwards. And it's like, I have people all the time, like, I can't go with everybody that asks me, but I have a couple of like little tips that I'll tell people, and I ask them, what's your priority? But, I always try to skew people into going late, and because I think when you get there, unless you have an incredible endurance, Disneyland from open to close is a very, very hard thing to do. And I feel bad for tourists on a one-day ticket park hopper that are just trying to get it all in. And, in many ways, they're going to have an amazing day, but they're just not going to get it all in. And that's when you got to really prioritize.
Yeah. And the feeling of like not getting your money's worth or missing out on the to-do thing, like, oh, nobody told me about Pirates of the Caribbean, and you're like, oh, well, we didn't do that one.
I feel so cheated for people that don't get to do certain things, but I think back to when I went to Disneyland Paris and I only had one day. There's a lot of stuff I didn't get to do, but I still left being like, man, that was pretty awesome and pretty special to get to do something. Speaking of Disneyland Paris, I'll be very curious, and this is just me speaking as a fan. You don't have to comment on this, but I'll be very curious to see when Disneyland reopens, a socially distant Disneyland reopens. In Paris, they have those two different like arcades that run the outside of Main Street. So you can go behind the shops. You can actually enter a store on Main Street from behind, or you can go in the front door and go out the back door. I'll be really curious to see if here in Anaheim, if we leave those back pathways open more, just to give people a less crowded experience, you know what I mean, to kind of come and go down Main Street. Because just when they open up those doors, I know it's not like themed to their desirable level, but it really does lessen the burden. So I wouldn't be surprised if those doors are open more in the future.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think it may be because I'm actually curious just about Disneyland. I don't have any particular inside knowledge on what their plans are, but just the way the parks are even are laid out. Disneyland is so much more compact, and those wide walkways that a lot of the other resorts are getting to utilize is not a thing at Disneyland.
No.
So they're going to have to make different decisions. While you can take some things and use them universally across the 6 resorts, like some of them have to design things specifically for where they're at.
Yeah.
Just because of the way things are laid out. I saw already just from friends in Hong Kong and Tokyo. Hong Kong was not, they weren't spacing out on their Grizzly Gulch coaster. So like they had families, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, but Tokyo, they were spacing out. So I was like, that's an interesting difference between two Disney parks, but run by two different, management teams about how they're deciding to do this. Obviously the lines are important, the markers are important, but with Disneyland, like I think specifically of those pinch points that you and I've been talking about, like New Orleans Square, that's a tough one. Granted, I think the attendance being so low won't make it as big of a factor, but
right, but
those are
it seems like the goal is week by week to slowly add in another 1,000 people or another 2,000 people or another 5,000 people. And I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I'm totally, whatever they decide, I'm going to trust their judgment. I'm not going to complain because I want it back and I want it to feel safe. And who knows better than they do? They're so good at people management. But I'm fully going into Disneyland with expectations that some areas will now be one way only, or there could be cast members that are enforcing when you're going to Adventureland, on the right side of the road, you're going towards Galaxy's Edge, and on the left side of the road, you're going back towards Main Street, and it will there will be a people flow like that. And in many ways, I've kind of enjoyed social distancing because there's a lot of people that they know they're there when their stroller hits your calves. And there's a lot of people that don't understand, like, waiting in line and giving human space. So in some ways, there will be some things. I'm guaranteeing everybody, there'll be a couple things you go there like, not for nothing, I hate wearing the mask, but I really appreciate the way that this attraction runs now and the way that it loads in and loads out. So I think that we will see some things that we feel is like a plus, just on getting more space. But yeah, it's going to be so fascinating to see what changes.
Like, you're going to be like, you know what? This mask is not the best, but I really am appreciating this non-boarding group 30-minute spaced out wait for a Rise of Resistance. This is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's some things I'm like, this isn't that bad. This is the new normal. Sign me up. And then there's gonna be other things like, oh, remember the good old days? Remember the good old days when you could just like go here or do that or decide which way you wanted to walk down one of the paths?
When someone didn't direct me. Okay, the last few I put into one giant one for you. So this is a big one.
Okay, a riddle.
So this is a big one. So this encompasses almost like 3 questions in one.
All right.
I was like, okay, this will be like his like kind of big challenge one. So the first one is you're entering into Disneyland at noon.
Okay.
With your buds, all adults, out of towners. They have time to do essentially 7 attractions to give them the Disneyland experience. So they're trusting you with what should be seen in that time at noon. And you need to slide a quick service meal into that 7 attractions. And you got to tell me the flow of those 7 incorporated with the quick service meal in there.
Okay. All right. This is tricky. Because I was going to say Bingo Barbecue. But if I want to do the meal mid-trip, it's either going to be the very beginning or the very end, because Indiana Jones is one of the 7 you've got to do because people from out of town love it. But Indiana Jones that's either going to be your strong closer or your blow their socks off starter. Pirates is another one that has to happen, and so is the Haunted Mansion. So I almost feel like that 3-way right there. We're going to go in Indy, we're going to do Pirates, and we're going to do Haunted. So we're going to go boom, 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 boom.
One after the other.
Yeah, so that's going to put me over at the end of New Orleans Square. So Hungry Bear now is looking like a good option, but Docking Bay 7 is such ambiance and also a bit of a healthy food. So if they're junk food guys and they want to get down and dirty fair food, I'm going to say let's do Hungry Bear and go to the very end where we're sandwiched between the boats going by and the Disneyland Railroad. If you go to the very peak of the deck, you're at that pinch point where you've got a lot of ambiance going around you.
Both ships and the railroad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just right there. And, if you got Columbian going by, that's right where they shoot off the one cannon to scare away
you get
folks.
The Columbia cannon. Brickey, what was that?
Don't worry about it. Some kids were trying to sneak in the park and they blasted them right off the fence. So that's my 3. So I'm going to let the dietary restrictions sort of figure out, because Docking Bay is also great because the outside deck, you have just people cruising by.
Yes. You
have the soundscape of over the top of you. And the food there is really, it's good. Whatever you get, whether it comes with it or not, like, don't forget, people, you can always go a la carte at Disneyland. So the blue cornbread muffin
Yes.
is to die for. So even if your dish doesn't come from one, add one of those on. You'll thank me later. So those are going to be my two. I've got to do something in Galaxy's Edge. So, I mean, is Rise on the table or is that not on the table?
I'm putting Rise on the table, and I feel like I want to do that because if you are giving anyone a Disneyland experience, or at least that has got to be one for like the over the top, like, you know, especially if you're showing them things like Mansion and Pirates, the progression of Imagineering or over time, like that almost needs to be seen just to show the succession of like history and how WDI, even though they were wed, was amazing back in the day, that these new kids coming in are doing it if just as good, you know. While people go argue about what's better, blah blah blah, they are keeping up with the pioneers that laid the groundwork before them. Obviously, they have much more technology, yada yada. But I'm gonna have you keep that on there. Don't worry about the boarding group. Okay. I also love that they did Docking Bay because I've also convinced tons of people, because of its proximity to Ronto Roasters, to grab that too. Oh, and they both kind of are right next to each other.
You can go two ways. If you just want to do a Ronto wrap, you could go that way. And that Tatooine Sunset is such a great drink.
God.
A little cup of sugar.
Drink.
Get you going.
Good.
I would say this, though. The cinnamon roll for breakfast at Docking Bay 7, I know we're on another planet, but can this planet please import traditional icing? Because it's just not sweet enough for this hillbilly. Okay. So I've got it all figured out. We're going to go to Indy first to sort of show them that middle child. Then I'm going to walk them over to Pirates and say, this is the beginning of audio animatronics. Then I'm going to take them to the Haunted Mansion and say, this is the first ride constructed in Walt's absence. We're going to do one of those two places to eat. Rise is going to show them the promise and the future. We're going to exit out and do Big Thunder Mountain. And I'm going to tell them at the tallest point, look over your shoulder because it's one of the greatest views of Disneyland you're going to get. And now we've done 5 benchmark, like adult type things. It's time to rechange the pace. So I'm going to look at the line for Peter Pan. And if it's just crazy, I can get the same nostalgia on Alice in Wonderland. And it's one of the only attractions that goes indoors, outdoors. But we got to crush a traditional dark ride. And then I'm going to finish up with Small World, because telling people the story of the 64 World's Fair, how all that came together. And keep in mind, Walt didn't always have an endless checkbook. He was a freelancer just like us and had to get work where he could get work. And the fact is, like, I will build this for you, UNICEF, but can I take it back home to my park?
They're like, yeah, whatever.
yeah, I mean, we won't need it after that.
We would need it.
So I would think that Indy, Pirates, Haunted, Rise, Thunder, Pan or Alice, Small World, that's running, as we say, that's run the jewels of Disneyland. That's really kind of giving you a little bit of everything. I don't know if this is cheating, but I'm done with Small World. I would love to walk them over to Toontown and take the train back out so we could go through a little Primeval. I mean, the train is an everywhere attraction.
That's like one of those things like, do you count this as an attraction or transportation? You're like, well, you know. That's like when I bring up to people that the monorail used to be a ride first.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? They're like, yeah, is that it? You just went around? It's like, well, yeah, but remember, this was 1959. Like, you're looking at now like, oh, we didn't even do anything. We just went over the top. I was like, yeah, but in 59, you know, sitting in this thing was pretty cool, you know.
And the fact that it took you out to harbor. So it was because Walt was obsessed with transportation, and Utopia predates the highway system. So, you know, you got to keep in mind the fact that the monorail runs parallel on harbor. It was leaving the park and saying, this is a glimpse into your future. And I really think that's a sacred part of that. On opening day, though, the Disneyland Railroad, that didn't cost you a ticket. That was just free with your admission.
I believe that one was just free for admission. Yeah.
Work me through this. Opening day, there's 2 trains running, 2 train stations running. You could get on the Main Street train station, and that would take you around, or you could get on the Frontier, and that would circumvent Main Street, but wouldn't let you back off till you get to Frontier. When today we get off at New Orleans Square, and we can hear the echo of Walt in the background, and we can see the old Frontier station to our left.
Yes.
Did that always sit there, or did they pull it off the rivers of America and put it back there? That's not its original location, right?
No, because they've constantly moved the train stations. Like, I think besides obviously the original at the very front, they all have moved at least one time. Okay. With I think the Toontown, that Fantasyland one, has probably moved, I think, the most.
Because it used to sit where Small World was, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then it got moved over. Then there was no Fantasyland for like 20 years, and then they did the Videopolis, and then it got rebranded to Toontown.
Yep.
Which is wild that just to think of that. But I was looking at old map and I'm like, okay, so the Frontierland station, which looks pretty permanent sitting there.
Yeah.
It looks like a museum piece. I'm like, that had to sit way closer to the rivers of America, because you're a good haul off the river and what would have been between those two points. But yeah, that if I had 7 that I could take people on, that would be an order that I would love to go on, because they would end, they would start off with having their expectations like blown away, and then they would end with sort of that, the kiss goodbye, as we hear so much, sort of the fundamental magic and going down to classics. But also all of those attractions pretty much give me the ability as a storyteller to share something really, really significant about Disneyland inside of those 7 rides.
I also love that you put, if you do the Galaxy's Edge one, you've gotten them off of Rise, and now you're talking about Rise, Mansion, Indy, and Pirates at lunchtime, like at that break.
Oh, yeah.
Where their mind is like, at that point, it's like, it's buzzing, where they're like, oh my God, I can't believe what we just did at that point. You're just like, I know, right?
And really, it would create a really, like, if they really were at that point, they want to become like, let's say it's one of their first times, they're like, okay, now I'm blown away because I thought this was for kids. I thought it was like, balloons and teacups. And then if you started to tell them the story of how Adventureland was an audition for New Orleans Square and Galaxy's Edge came from that, then they would start to realize like, oh, it started out as a hallway, went into like a little city town square, and developed into a whole, 14-acre stretch on the backside of the park. That really kind of gives people the idea of how everything at Disneyland borrows from its rich history.
I also love that you, after lunch, put them on something that, were you doing Big Thunder after? What were you doing Big Thunder?
Part 2. That's Act 2. Yeah.
Half of the Act 2. Yeah, it's a good path walking around. Big Thunder is always a fun one for me when I'm walking around with people, because it sits kind of in the middle. And now with the pathway going around the Rivers of America with Galaxy's Edge, you're like, oh, am I doing it coming out of Galaxy's Edge, or are we doing it beforehand, then going down to like Pirates Mansion Splash? Like, it's that like odd middle one that's like not on the rim. Because even though you could say Matterhorn's in the middle of the park because of the lagoon and Autopia, it counts as like the border of the park as well, because you can't walk back there. Big Thunder is like that oddball e-ticket that sits like directly like in the center, and you have to walk through lands to access it, as opposed to keep it on the rim that you like to do when you do your big move around.
Yeah, and Matterhorn's great, but it would kind of break up that emotional 1-2 punch. And the thing about Matterhorn is if you got people in from out of town, and let's say they got a flight the next day, Matterhorn's is rough. And as much as I love the pockets, because if we're doing this in 7 hours, it's starting to get later, you might catch a sunset, or I love looking out the different holes of Matterhorn to get all these like vista points of Disneyland, but it is a rough ride. And I think locals maybe like it better than Big Thunder, but Big Thunder has that story. And I would love the idea of when you bring them around, you can be like, you see all this little old cowboy town, like this has been here for a long time and it got moved over. Whereas you can kind of tell Matterhorn's story quite easily when you're walking by it, or when you're waiting in line at Alice. You can be like, well, you see that, and blah, blah, blah. And there's a basketball court on the top of it. And
what?
Why is that?
Or they tell you, hey, Brickey, have you heard?
No, I haven't. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Brickey, I just saw this amazing thing. It's called the Imagineering Story.
What's that about?
And in it, they had this old guy who went up. You don't say an old guy, huh?
Oh, really?
What was his name? Oh, I don't know. I can't remember, but he played up there. He's like, that's amazing.
Did the old guy have a little bit of attitude, like a chip on his shoulder? Because then I might know who you're talking about.
All right. So your next one
Okay.
is the same thing.
Okay.
We'll say it's like in the evening now. This is like your prime time.
Okay.
But it's going to be DCA. So you're going to fit in that dinner QSR, kind of like how we did for Disneyland side.
Right.
It's DCA, and it's going to be 4 attractions this time.
Okay.
So you're 4 that have them see like DCA for what it is. You know,
Okay.
a little bit of history in there, or its current, like how it is in its current incarnation. So yeah, 4. You're in there about evening time, so 5 p.m. I know I'm sure you're gonna try to shape that Cars Land.
Oh, come on, man. That sunset. Well, we're doing quick service too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's 5:00, and I'm gonna look at my Apple Watch. The sun goes down tonight at 8. So this time around, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna knock out Guardians first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to judge the time, and I think I can do Guardians, and then I can do single rider racers, and that's going to get me on racers, like sort of a little bit of a dusk type setting.
Yep.
Then if all goes according to plan, I'm going to take my little babies over to the Cozy Cones. Highly recommend Cone Queso.
Yes.
And they'd be like, why don't, and this is how I love to cruise Disneyland without town. I'm like, let's go get our food and let's just sit over here. So we're sitting there, and then all of a sudden, life would be a dream. Yeah, and that starts happening, and then it's just like they're like, "What's going on here?" So that would blow them away, and I got 2 attractions down. So I'm gonna probably, if I'm sitting right there, and we're in that like, I got to do something over on the pier. I'm gonna switch this plan around. We're gonna do, instead of Mermaid this time, I'm gonna take them on an Incredicoaster because they're roller coaster types, because the pier is designed where the sun drops down behind it. It's beautiful over there.
Beautiful.
And then when you get off of that, if it's nicely fully lit, it's great. And then this time our exit is going to be Soarin', because it's dark. You're going indoors, you're coming out, and maybe if we plan it just right, when we're walking out of Buena Vista Street, we might be able to catch a little fireworks over across the other part, which I love that too. But yeah, I got a lot of love for DCA, and I think Disneyland, socially distant Disneyland, will see way more changes than DCA, because DCA has the wider, more modern walk pass. With Disneyland, we're retrofitting something that's 65 years old.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
old bones,
a lot of evolution, and a lot of history that we have to redesign for the current state of being. So I think DCA will probably feel the most familiar to us, but Disneyland's going to be a wild one.
And it's crazy too, because now we're looking at like the Galaxy's Edge and Project Stardust. That it will end up helping this current incarnation of Disneyland in these new times as well, which is like so like you couldn't even have planned for that, but it like works out so well.
I know. It's like they just literally last year finished a year-long project of taking out curbs, widening walkways, cutting back planters, moving trees, moving benches. It was almost as if it was planned for this moment. It's crazy. That's why I think Bill Gates is in charge of all of this.
Like they were even just starting, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, they were just starting to do their widening for the Frontierland.
Yeah, that's still going on right
as well.
now. Yeah.
Like how perfect. Like couldn't even have, just for completely different reasons.
Philander, do you think that if you and I are at the 100-year anniversary, just 2 old guys at 2055 standing there with their rockers, do you think that we'll still see Frontierland and Disneyland?
Oh. Man. That's a great question. It's so much land. And there's a part of me that says no. My heart wants it to be there because Disneyland needs to have those areas that are just relaxed and like it can't be the Six Flag coasters all day all night thing like that. There has to be those areas that are just the Twain, the Columbia. Those have to exist. And I know that I remember when Big Thunder was being added, that was because people were getting tired and bored of Frontierland. And I feel like Big Thunder is something that will always be there because it has stood the test of time of being something that is not something that's so, it's thrilling without being like overbearing in a sense where
it's a good
everyone
balance.
Can do it. Mm-hmm. It's a perfectly balanced coaster. My favorite one that they've made at that resort for sure.
Because my idea is this.
Mm-hmm.
I think Rivers is obviously there forever, and the boat rides in Fantasmic. And when they put in Galaxy's Edge, they really committed to Fantasmic by putting that hidden warehouse by the waterfall. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I almost see that becoming absorbed by New Orleans Square and whatever the future of Critter Country may be. But I think that Frontierland, we're so far away from people really caring about Westerns and that idea. Mm-hmm. My heart would break because if you look at Disneyland from left to right, it's a timeline of America. You go from the frontier to Main Street to Tomorrowland, and it's a timeline of the American story. But I almost feel like there might be a moment when it feels so outdated and awkward that there could be a better vehicle to get people over to the rivers of America. And there might be a more appropriate reimagined area in there. That being said, I love the sounds of Frontierland, and I love walking. Like if I can, I love walking on the wooden walkways in front of the shops and the restaurants there. And I love the Halloween tree. It's the only Halloween tree I know of. I go there every year and make a wish, a Halloween wish, and it never comes true. But it could be interesting to see if that's one of the original lands that lasts through the first 100 years.
And I think even too, like agreeing with you, they may like, I could almost imagine that getting smaller. Yeah. Like that almost seems more likely than the outright removal of it is them devoting more land to like New Orleans Square, or something, or even Adventureland to give that those more, because like you said, that's just the time period that it's just, it doesn't hold nearly as much as it did, especially when you had programs that supported its existence like Zorro and Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
You know, it was almost like that's such a core thing in like the zeitgeist of pop culture that helps support that space.
And call me crazy, but I don't see Disney Plus rushing out to make any content that supports that narrative in 2020.
The new Davy Crockett show on Disney Plus.
Don't worry, we got this. We know how to. Are you sure? No, we got this. Yeah,
Davy Crockett for modern audiences.
I mean, I think that the shooting gallery probably has limited years on it, and I'll tell people it is really, really fun. Like most people, like I talk to people that are born and raised out here. They've never put their quarters up on the counter and gone at it. But one night, me and a friend from San Diego and a friend from England, we must have put $20 in that thing, and we were having. It's really, really fun because when you start shooting, you're like, well, if I shoot that train. You don't really realize that it's all interactive when you're just cruising by and be like, something that costs more money? No way, over my dead body. But I don't know. I could see that. I guess that's the northern side of it. I could see that maybe becoming something else. But the southern side of it is so immaculately curated. And it's actually very tied into Adventureland, right? Like a lot of those shops are the backside of Adventureland, and some of them are even actually walkthroughs where you can cut through land to land. So I see that island as being pretty set in stone, but the other side of the road feels like it could be a question mark moving forward.
Yeah, because I think a lot of those Big Thunder, like the attractions in that area are gonna like have their moment where they have they're like kind of set in stone there. They are either so much a part of what Disneyland is, or also they are just very simple to maintain, to operate, where they're used in some kind of nighttime entertainment to where their value there is more than just, we get into the whole thing of people like, well, you can take out this and take out this. Like, it's like we're just plucking things out. Like Legos, it's such an easy thing to do. But I think so much of the West Side is locked in. And I like in talking about Splash Mountain so much over the past week, like I'm sure you have as well with people. It's never one that I imagined necessarily that would be there forever, especially because the movie, Song of the South is not one that's so ingrained in people. Like when people love Splash Mountain, it's more so the attraction, obviously, as opposed to the film, because Disney has made sure to, not have that available for people. It's like, I love Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox because of Splash Mountain specifically. But that's not one that I would think. The only thing that would make me think that they would keep that is because it acts as that water attraction that Disneyland, while it doesn't necessarily need it, like a thing to get you wet, but it keeps it
well-rounded, right?
Mm-hmm. It keeps the park like there's so many different options. Like having that type of wet flume ride, that would have been the only thing that would keep me safe. Have it keep safe in my mind. Now with it being Tiana, it has a very popular, which is amazing, just because not a lot of people gave it its time of day when it was in theaters. Gives it that like kind of pull that will hold on to it for a while, and Disney will always be pushing its princesses for long after you and I are gone, because that is such a part of the fairy tale aspect of Disneyland. It's princess characters, so I think that will settle in with Tiana and be there for probably longer than Splash Mountain was ever there, because that was 30 years for Splash Mountain. Yeah, they just had the 30th birthday. Tiana will extend that well beyond, I think, 30 years, because she's got that like timeless fairy tale story that's set in like the 1940s ish that will kind of last. But yeah, Frontierland is so specific. Like the rest of them make so much sense about staying on past 100. Adventureland being that like that wild, that area of the world that you're not so familiar with, but it exists. Fantasyland, obviously the fairy tale.
Fantasyland is set in stone after the 83 rehab. Like that's that one, Fantasyland and Main Street, like that center spine of the park, that's dialed in. And I also think that Adventureland is very dialed in. It hasn't dated, and it represents sort of this exoticness that most people will never get to encounter. I mean, there's a couple things in there we both know could be cleaned up and probably will be quickly, but I feel like if Frontierland makes the course, I feel like that it skews Mexican and pays tribute more to like a Mexico type vibe on the other side, because just the whole frontier and cowboy type time, it doesn't make sense. But if it were, you've already got the restaurant there on the corner, if the rest of that would skew more in that way, I see it lasting a lot longer if it can diversify like that. And I also feel like with our cultural makeup here in Southern California, that would be a really sweet thing. And I'm all about the snacks. So if it goes that way, I'm over there with $20 in my hand. Sign me up. But yeah, when I was doing a little bit of research about Disneyland and how Walt basically didn't have IP, so he packaged up America and sold it to his guests, knowing that if you loved America,
great episode, by the way.
Thank you. He knew that if you loved America, you would love Disneyland, because it was themed after this thing that you love. But I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking, that is just a part of entertainment. Unless they do something crazy, I'm like, we're going to buy Westworld. Trust us. So many people, Philander, are like, Brickey, you'd love Westworld. You're into amusement parks. I got halfway through the first season. I'm like, what about me made you think that this is a fantasy that I would be inclined to go? Get out of here.
I think like you, I've had so many conversations with people where it's that whole dreaded IP thing, which I love having that conversation with people, where you and I both know, and I think other people do as well, that it's like Walt was not, he wasn't an idiot. Like he needed the draw. Like that was the biggest thing. Like what's the draw? And every land there is based on a draw. Like, or I think I mentioned it to you about Disneyland at the very beginning being that draw specifically, and then once he knew that he had kind of got people, then in the 60s he's like, all right, now I'm gonna get weird with it now, because I've got you now, and now I can kind of experiment some more, because I've got my fan base, we're worldwide known. I can now start to play around with things, and I can make this haunted mansion. While I may not have necessarily dropped that on you at the very beginning due to technology and how you would have felt about it, this now feels like now I can bring this thing in. I can bring in these pirates. I can bring in, all this other stuff. But so much of it, that IP thing always is like, oh, it's such a buggy thing to me where they're like, whoa, it's all this. I'm like, there's so many. And I think it was you that mentioned to me, like, that didn't even cross my mind when you mentioned to me that, of course, the Haunted Mansion is an IP because Walt didn't invent ghosts or pirates.
Same.
Like, you're going into a Haunted Mansion because you love that part of like the mystery of ghosts and spirits and things like that. And that draws you to this attraction. And Walt did not create a ghost house, or a haunted mansion.
He created those ghosts and those pirates that we all feel like we know. And that's, when I looked at Galaxy's Edge, I was so happy with the way that they did it, because if it was just everything from the movie, it wouldn't make Disneyland special. But the fact that there's parts of Galaxy's Edge that you only get to experience there, it makes it like Adventureland. It makes it like New Orleans Square. And the guy gambled everything on Disneyland, and so he was trying to hedge his bets and just make sure that people would show up and be like, what is all this? And he did a really good job of sort of going past, present, and future. And with the future, really the optimism that America had in the 50s and its architecture. And, we hadn't gone to the moon yet, but people could feel that was on the edge of what was happening. It was coming. We didn't have our transportation dialed in, but people could feel that it was happening. I'm going to start going with this, Philander. A lot of people say, don't forget, it all started with the mouse. I'm like, get out of here. That's for the movies. The park, it all started with the train. His love of trains.
Yep.
Really got that place buzzing, because every guy that builds trains, after you get your trains, you spend all your time building the model village around it. And that's what Disneyland was.
Keep adding to it
for a rich guy. Did I pass my test? Is there any more on the list before we part ways today?
You have passed the test. You are ready for your
18-hour
your big day. You're ready for the 65th anniversary of Disneyland.
I hope you come over to the feed this Friday. And you just...
I'm popping in there for
you turn it on and you just see me in my head going... just
kind of like, well...
here's the brick wall.
Just pointing out random stuff now.
There's only one real flag.
This kind of looks like a hidden Mickey. I don't know.
Yeah, hey, check it out. You know that I'm done when I just start playing Imagineering Story and you don't see me in the feed anymore?
Yeah, just having that on the back.
Well, hey, bud, I appreciate you helping me sharpen my skills. And I have to say, we just invented a game show for a very specific type of maniac.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But, knowing how the park runs and knowing how it buzzes and the people flow and all that stuff, it's like it goes to prove that you can keep leveling up your love for the park. Because when I think about it, and you and I have talked about this before, of just opening up the app when you're waiting for a flight just to see what's happening at Disneyland, you get a real contact buzz. It's not open right now for you and I, knowing that it was opening and that it was alive and that people were there and enjoying it and looking at the ride times. There's just something about the kinetic energy of how it runs on its own that is a whole different level of love for the way that it works and for that magical place.
You're looking at the app, seeing the times, and you're almost putting yourself in your mind down into the app itself and imagining what, oh my gosh, let's see. Peter Pan is 45, Toad is 20, Pinocchio is 15, Snow White's 10, King Arthur's 10, and now I can see what that Fantasyland looks like in my head.
Right.
I can see the people in it, or I'm like, wow, Peter Pan 25,
what's going on? Is there a fire?
Where's the fire at? Oh my gosh. I like to do that for I've been doing a lot thinking of you. I've been doing it a lot recently with the apps for the foreign parks, just because they have been, especially when Shanghai first opened. I've had the apps for for years on my phone, just because it's fun to look at them, in the same way that you do, but now they're almost somewhat more interesting because they're utilizing the less capacity, so gathering what a wait looks like in a much smaller capacity size Shanghai Disneyland is very interesting, because you're like, oh, interesting, like, is this attraction particularly popular right now, or is it because of the way they are spacing out the attractions?
Right.
Like so much that goes into that, like things that used to be people leaders now can't be that way anymore because the boat, for whatever reason, let's say Shanghai Pirates, is not packed anymore. And we know, both you and I, that WDI designed this thing to push them through.
Right.
And now it's no longer that thing anymore.
Every other road doesn't necessarily do that for us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is, I'm fascinated about how this will change the way WDI looks at attractions that they have not designed yet in the future. Do they still move forward with that push them through mentality, or do they make slight alterations to where that may not necessarily be one of the most important things when creating an attraction anymore,
Yeah, no, I mean, you bring up a good point that there's got to be projects right now where, a guy and a gal's like, this hallway we've been working on, I'm suddenly now seeing a whole different angle for what we're trying to accomplish, because
it can't be this little anymore.
No. And, so many of the things that you're like, oh, this thing at Disneyland, it'll be this way forever because it's grandfathered in. I'm sure the Wrecking Ball is going to have to come for a couple of things and just sort of redesign stuff. But, at time of recording this, Downtown Disney is now open. But you and I are 2 days away from getting to go in there for the first time. And I'm really curious to see, do people hold off on Downtown Disney because it's too much of a teaser and it's not the real thing, or do people just want to be close to it? Because when I go there, if I can walk up to the gates of Disneyland and just stare at the train station, you better believe I'm standing there. So it'll be very interesting to see the true love for Downtown Disney when it's standing on its own without the magic of DCA and Disneyland sort of making it a plus for an evening or an off day on your hotel reservation.
I believe, to make you smile, that is, I think it's supposed to be the case. I need to look for sure, because I believe they're going to have people be able to walk that way if they're leaving, I want to say. I'm going to double check that. But I believe that there will be business there because, like you and I, there's that fix that you need to get.
Yes.
And while not all of Downtown Disney is the Disney fix, like I already know people that just want to go to go into World of Disney,
right? Because
that shop alone
feels,
I'm like, that it feels like Disney, like being surrounded by the merchandise and the characters and all the projection stuff. Like that shop exudes that like Emporium, Buena Vista Street, Main Street feel.
Yeah, it has
that
the
you
same
would not
vibe,
get.
Same merch. It's arguably the world's greatest Disney store because it's not actually in the parks, but it has that vibe to it. Yeah. On my list of things to do is I want to go into that shop. I cannot wait to crush some salt and straw. Cannot wait. Just gonna open up my mask and just drop the scoops in, and whatever happens, happens. But
like a horse with a horse feed.
Yeah, the feed on my face. But I also just want to sit on a planner and just listen to the loop. I want to feel it alive again, and I'm very excited to do that.
Yeah, it'll have a good feel. Like there's that feeling or that presence that comes from the people watching aspect, the music, the cast members that I know that are excited to be back there, to be giving. I had a friend message me not that long ago, and he's like, I can't wait to make magic again, which is such a thing. Like where I love when you say like, thank you for your service. It's like individuals who are excited to make people happy again in ways. And granted, it won't be nearly as extravagant as when the park is open, but still, I can't. People get that job at the park because they really love making people smile and being a part of this much bigger thing, and being surrounded by that, and even just seeing not the characters themselves, but like it's such a familiar home thing for so many people.
Right.
Like you've walked this thing, and I think a lot of people take downtown for granted because for many it's used just as the pathway to get back to your hotel.
Yeah.
But now that it exists as this, it's the only Disney thing you can do. It will take on that whole other feel of.
I think so. I think it'll take on a whole new meaning and vibe to people that, you know, this is the appetizer, right? Like to kind of hold you over till the main course is made available. And, you know, even though I'm the champion, world record, no big deal.
No big deal.
You know, if you let me, I'm going to walk out of the park every time because walking through downtown and then going, you know, somehow around the Disney hotel, it just keeps the magic going. And you know, we keep giving up things for progress. And one of the things that we lost in the last couple of years that I was sad about is I used to love that walkway where you could basically walk on the outside of downtown Disney and you were walking parallel with the tram course. Like I love that. Like it felt like a Disneyland trail and you're in the woods and you weren't really, you know, you weren't submerged in commerce.
It took you out to the street.
Yeah, I love that pathway so much. But I'm also a big fan of the new bridge and the wacky like walk up to get to it. So it will be really, really fun to go to downtown Disney. And I'm not, you know, I don't know if I would do that once a week like I do the park, but from time to time over the next month or months, it will be nice to have that as an option. I know that we lost the void for a couple of different reasons, but that felt too weird to do during COVID times. Like, who else has wore this helmet today? So I can kind of understand that one, but
I couldn't imagine that they would have been open anyway.
Yeah.
And we all know that they cleaned, obviously, in between individuals. There's no way that you put that thing on and feel someone else's sweaty, you know, head on this, but it's still an odd thing to have
in these times.
In these times, like they would have had to have held off a little bit longer than everybody else. But yeah, the vibe, you know, I think it's going to take on a whole new meaning of. And I do agree with you that there are people that are going to be holding off because in looking and talking to friends who are at Disney Springs in Florida, it's not nearly as busy because a lot of people are waiting for that part to open. For now, the park is a complement. The downtown Disney or Disney Springs is a complement to the park experience. Where I've done a big day in the parks, and now I want to finish up with Springs or downtown Disney, so they're going to wait for that. But there are others that I know that want that fix, and that like, oh, they're like, it's like playing that like a game where they're like, all right, Brickey, we're going to let you in. You can walk 10 feet closer to Disneyland. They're like, okay,
I'll take it. I'll take 10 feet.
I'll take that 10 feet. And they're like, okay, now you can walk another 15 feet closer. You're like, all right, I just want to keep getting closer and closer to it.
If they really wanted to help out the restaurateurs, I think the greatest, because we have no idea when it's opening back up. I mean, it could be August. It could very well be January. We have no idea. I think if they wanted to make a primo Disney experience that people would feel safe, is you take the Esplanade and you socially distance that as a giant food court and you run that loop and you give me the ability to go get my salt and straw or to go get my pizza or my Mediterranean food or my Mexican food or my Louisiana food, and I can easily go get it, buy it from one of those merchants, and then I can go out there and get my table and have a view of DCA, have a view of Disneyland, have that loop going, and feel like I'm 15 feet from everybody around me at my own little circular table. I'm eating dinner there once a week. Once a week I'm sitting in there. Once a week I'm out there eating.
Just also so you can hear that Esplanade loop as well.
You got a friend in me. And I'm just like, I wonder what movie this is from.
It's like, I don't know.
Who made this song? No, I that would be the perfect use for that area and that would be one of those amazing picks of like, you remember in 2020 when they used this as a food court when they couldn't open up the parks? Like,
they're like, no way. Like, yeah, man, I had a table right here.
That's the crazy thing about Disneyland and becoming a student of it is people will tell you something and you're like, shut up. And then you go and research and you're like, son of a, that was something that happened. I still say greatest cast member of all time is the poor astronaut that had to walk around in the Anaheim sun with a fishbowl on his head. Oh my gosh. How did that guy not have a heat stroke?
The hardest working cast member.
Oh my Lord. When you see those photos, you're like, how did he not die every day?
Yeah. that like reflective, like silver.
Just
It looks like he's in tinfoil, like a thing that you would use to heat up like a hot pocket. You know,
the Crispin sleeve.
The Christmas sleeve.
Philander, thank you for taking another lap with me. Thank you for helping me make sure that I'm ready to take on this task.
You were ready.
It's going to be a grueling day, but I couldn't think of any place else I'd rather be on July 17th than at Disneyland, even if it has to be virtual this year.
Yeah, it'll be fun popping in and out and people checking in and kind of commenting,
You're doing it wrong.
keeping it going. Oh, God. Why'd you go this way? You know? Oh, my goodness.
I've been practicing and doing like little 3-hour tours every Friday, and just a virtual roll through Disneyland. People are just excited to kind of feel it. And this last week, I showed my footage from this year's Veterans Day and did the flag ceremony.
Ah, okay.
People were just excited to be in there and watching my own footage and seeing me in there, and like I was like, oh God, I miss it so bad.
So like it's digging in deep.
It really is. And then, you know, whether you were happy or sad about the reopening date, it just was nice to have that on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
And now we're back into the abyss. And
push you back in the pool.
I really didn't. I thought that the downtown would get canceled. But if you think about it, like, you know, the shopping areas where I live here and where you live, they're all open.
Yeah.
These merchants deserve the same rights to be open and to not be paying rent and to have customers show up. What a novel idea. But yeah, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be excited about it. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm glad we get to hang out and do it together. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It's fun to do it as friends. And I'm doing also like good to see. It'll be fun to see my buddies that are going to be there as well.
Yeah.
And kind of like ask them how it's been and see. And a lot of things, I think it'll be nice for people to see all of the safety precautionary things.
Right.
Because from what I looked into Disney Springs, it's very well done. A lot of things were thought of. Some things that I saw that no one else even thought of, which was great because I've been looking into other theme parks like Universal has opened up their Florida version and other places. But I saw the thing, SeaWorld in Florida, that Disney, it was nice for them to take their time because they were able to look at what everyone else was doing, and then do that or even do it better in some cases. Like Disney still to this, when we're recording this, they were the only people that I had seen that had removed the flap on the trash can. So now you don't push it open with your hand anymore. They just flat out took it out. And I hadn't seen anyone else do that up to that point. But it's just like little things that you don't think about, like one less thing you have to touch, you know, to, you know, ensure that you are not going to get sick or whatnot. But it's little stuff like that, which is important. So I'm interested to see how they work the flow of that location. Because unlike Disney Springs, ours is that very specific corridor.
Right.
You know, how they have the walkways, or I'm sure, you know, how like Uva Bar is in the middle, like is one going to be going up and one going down?
Right.
You know, there's so many things to think of. And I think you also agree with that kind of planning or that tiny details oriented stuff is so fascinating. You like to be a part of that, like the guest flow.
Yeah. And, you know, I've said this to people. People are like, so Brickey, when are you going? They're like, you know, Disneyland opens tomorrow. When are you going? I go, tomorrow. And they're kind of blown away. And I'm like, well, it's not Disneyland with 55, 60,000 people in it. And at some point, I got to go back out in the world and start living my life. And I would love to do that someplace that is a private property where safety is being managed and maintained. Because right now, if I just walk down, you know, the streets where I live here in Southern California, there's no sheriff on the corner telling people like, yo, you got to do this, you got to go home. It's everybody's kind of just living by their own rules. And some people are being very judgy on either side of the fence. So I love the idea of going someplace where there's agreed upon set of rules and everybody has to participate or they have to go home. And I really wish America was being ran that way right now. So going someplace where those rules are decided for you, I actually very much look forward to that.
Having the security there, the guest experience team there that are answering questions, making sure that everyone's wearing their mask properly. Like it feels good to know that there will be places that exist that are like that, where you can enjoy a little bit of what you used to have, knowing that this is the least possible place that you could potentially get sick due to the fact that specific rules are being enforced, and you're still able to kind of go out and have, a little bit of fun like you used to have. Not the exact same, but kind of slowly stepping back into that pool that we used to be in.
I'm telling you right now, if they did a ticket where it's like none of the rides are open, but you can come in and sit on a bench,
your day one,
or you can have a lunch or whatever. Yeah, I'll go for a Disney dinner package only, where I get my fried chicken and I just sit next to Astro Orbiters and don't let anybody ride them, but just run them. I just want to see Dumbo. I'm never riding Dumbo anyways, but I just want to see it going around in circles. Let the teacups run and that look man.
I just want to hear the music. That's that is more than enough for you.
Sell me that ticket all day long. In fact, if they if they need a little extra money when they're powering everything up, I'll buy that ticket. I just want to be in there and be around the ambiance of it all. And, if there's other people that have to go in and crush rides, that's their Disney experience. But to me, I'm all about the vibes. And I just think that this is, if you can get your head right, this is a very pivotal and interesting chapter in the park's history. And we are all given the opportunity to go there and to see it happen with our own eyes. So I look forward to it. And, I love reading all the details. One of the things I'm most excited about seeing when I get back into socially distant Disneyland is the social squad. I'm very interested to see that positive reinforcement. I love your mask. I love the way you're wearing your mask. And, working with kids to feel safe and to have self-confidence that your mask is cool and it's part of what you're doing. I love that positive reinforcement and positive peer pressure. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that part of attractions runs. But Philander, thanks a lot for doing this with me, man. It's always a good time. I'll see you this Friday at Virtual Disneyland.
Woo! Thanks.
Friends, I thought I could do it before, but now I feel completely capable of doing the unheard of, recreating an entire operational day of Disneyland, 18-hour live stream, trying to bring it all together, because I'm telling you right now, this Friday, I don't want to sit around being bummed out that the park's not open. I don't want to sit around thinking about, for the first time in 65 years on July 17th, people can't go to 1313 Disneyland Drive and celebrate what this thing means to all of us. So if just one person shows up, well, hopefully one person at Twitch and one person over at YouTube, so I can justify that they're both there. So if two other people show up, and even if I don't know you, even if we're strangers, I know one thing. Friend, if you've made it this far in today's episode, you love Disneyland like I love Disneyland, which means strangers, socially distant, far apart, it doesn't matter, because you and I, we're citizens of Disneyland, and we have to celebrate this park that we love so much. We have to try to make Friday feel as normal as possible. We have to just totally get into the mindset that we're at Disneyland, because for one day, we can show each other and the world how much we love this place, but also for one day, we can escape from wherever we're actually at today. And that is my goal, just to create a good time, a good vibe for everybody that shows up. And I guarantee you, I will work my hardest to make that happen. But it only happens if I see you this Friday at Virtual Disneyland over on YouTube. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/adventures in design. And then I'm on Twitch at twitch.tv AID network. Both streams are absolutely free. It doesn't cost anything to show up other than your time and your love of Disneyland. So until this place reopens, you can see me here each and every Wednesday as I reopen the gates and take you into Disneyland with me, and maybe one of my friends will join us as well. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you so much for listening. I hope wherever you're at, you're feeling safe, you're feeling good, and this help you escape and remind you of that love that you have for Disneyland. Till the next time I see you, friend, make sure you live the magic every single day.